Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has vampire wife in high school DxD. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Kyoto141092 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Now on to the story. Prologue. Raynare Levon Lucifer was not considered to be an overly ambitious man for most of his life, tending to be childish and insulting even to his fellow great devils. That had all changed though. These days it would be hard to find a more ambitious devil, highborn or otherwise, but with all power and ambition there came times when he wondered if it was all worth it. And as you could probably imagine, in a few thousand years, there were many times he thought this. Times when all the work and planning seemed useless, and as though the world was crumbling around him. He didn't like it when he felt such fear. Emotions like that were useless to him, and only brought scorn from his other conspirators. But surely if they knew what was going on now they would feel the same way. And as it was, all those other times were about to fade into insignificance. Dressed in the Devil Lord equivalent of casual wear, Raynare soared through the majestic halls of his castle. While this particular wing of his home was not strictly his, this portion of the Lucifer estate belonged to his cousin. She had living here for the better part of 17 years, ever since she got pregnant. Since then, she had caused a never-ending list of problems, and most of them didn't even have the dubious honor of being easy to deal with. Raynare smoothed the handle his hair in annoyance. He really wanted to strangle her at the moment, but unfortunately he was in no position to do so after all. How was he supposed to strangle someone who could kill him with a flick of her wrist? Yet he wasn't planning on making any moves on her, violent or otherwise. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, Raynare pushed open the door to her personal chambers and entered, black cloak billowing in his wake. And there she was. He stopped in front of her, clearing his throat to speak, but she beat him to it. I am not in the mood, Vimkuin. Another time perhaps? Her voice was sweet but low for a woman of her size, and it carried the weight of power. She didn't even bother to look up at him, instead preferring to scribble over a large scroll which was draped over a table. Kushina, we need to talk now, he said with a bit of urgency. This cannot wait for later. Her red lips tightened as she finished whatever notes she was taking. She sighed and put down her pencil, standing straight. Kushina was tall, with dark red hair which fell around her in a crimson curtain. It easily brushed the floor if it was unstyled. At the moment, however, it was released in all its glory. A sigh escaped her as she pulled her own small hands through her hair, managing to make the movement far more elegant than he could. Kushina's piercing blue eyes flashed with irritation, while she crossed her arms under her considerable bust. Raynare used all his considerable force of will not to look at her bare. His cousin wasn't a fan of clothes and often went in the nude when in her own private chambers, but that wouldn't stop her from tearing an arm or a leg off if she caught him looking. She was vehemently anti-pervert. Well? If it's so important, say it already. She growled low in her throat, startling him into action. Yes, the Chaos Brigade members under Orpheus's direct leadership have captured another member of the Yokai's people. He's one of the four-tailed foxes, a low-ranked member of the group, but he has considerable stores of power. I wanted to incorporate. His voice was cut off mid-speech as his cousin forced her delicate hand through his armor and into his chest cavity, her slender fingers clutching around his heart even as it beat. Her voice was cold and furious. I've warned you already. You will address my son with the respect he is due, or I will rip your heart out and eat it. Of course. He gasped in agony as she ripped her hand free, splashing bright red blood over her pale skin. She hissed at him, showing razor-sharp fangs. Remember who inherited the power of Lucifer. You are a weak and spoiled child with only a fraction of my strength. Kushina used her devil magic to burn the blood from her skin. It flaked off, leaving her as spotless as before. A second passed as his wounds slowly closed over. Her attack was not meant to injure him, only to punish him for his speaking out of turn. He gasped again as Kushina proceeded to backhand him, sending a loud snap through the room. My son is already powerful enough without your tampering. He doesn't require any more chakra abilities, or yokai magic at all for that matter. She spat. Now, unless you are going in to see him, then get out of my sight. You pathetic excuse for a devil lord. Raynare rose to his feet, using one hand to pop his neck back into the proper placement. He was used to this harsh treatment from his cousin by now. It wasn't as if his power wasn't great enough to ignore most damage she dealt. Only her magic could harm him. And no amount of physical strength would kill one as strong as he was. I will see the boy then and be gone afterwards, he said hesitantly. Sometimes she wouldn't allow him to see his heir, even when she said he could. After all, she was extremely protective of him. Raynare didn't personally understand how she could be worried for him. The brat was damned near indestructible. His father had seen to that. Kushina snarled at him, but quickly reined in her bloodthirst. Raynare once again reminded himself not to anger her. It was just so hard not to be his usual insulting self. He enjoyed the banter between opponents, but his cousin, along with that whole side of the family, were dangerous to joke with. He didn't even want to think how painful it would be for him if Kushina's son had half as much of a temper. Makes me just that much more glad that he's taking after his father, even if he was a half-breed bastard. Although he seems to be picking up a few bad habits from his godfather. Guess that's unavoidable, though, he muttered under his breath as he moved past his cousin, keeping a good distance between them. His mind once again returned to the mystery that was her side of the family. Kushina was what the current Devil Kings referred to as a perfect devil. Someone who not only had unsurpassed power, but also embodied the teachings and views of devilkind. She was almost 6,000 years old, quite a bit younger than him, yes, quite a bit, but her power was also quite beyond his own. It all had something to do with an ancient contract with the original Lucifer. The very first Lucifer had claimed that his power would be passed down through his family, but it would gather unequally among his children. Only those who were found to be worthy would gain a large portion of his power. Thus, even though he could trace his own lineage directly to the founding father of Hell, his distant cousin had much more power. In fact, she had almost 10 times as much power as he did. While he calculated that he inherited 3% of his predecessor's power, she took 30%. He wasn't necessarily angry with her over it, despite being a bit jealous. She was just a pure-blood royal like him, just as fit to have it, but it did cause problems. For instance, when she married a half-human, half-vampire hybrid named Minato Nankase and had a mixed-blood son, her offspring was half-devil, 1/4 human, and 1/4 vampire. And not just any vampire either. He was from the House of Vosk, a side branch of Valdi family. Rizvim knew that the boy was an abomination. As if being half-vampire wasn't bad enough, but to have human blood, it disgusted him. However, he had his uses, and more importantly, he had his sacred gear. The mightiest non-Longinus he'd ever encountered. It compared well with even against the strongest of the 13 great artifacts. It was called Demon's Eye, Maelstrom Absorption. He had no delusions about what the boy could do to him, and so he was forced to play nice with him. After all, Naruto had the highest concentration of Lucifer's power ever seen. He was the legitimate heir to the throne, above Surzex and the rest of his traitorous family. Above even himself. Curse that boy's luck. It's as if heaven itself bestowed its greatest miracle upon him, giving him such power. Rizvim closed his eyes. A loud knock at the boy's bedroom door, then another. Rizvim frowned and turned the door handle, entering the large chamber beyond Shit. Kushina came running. "What is it?" she demanded. Kushina and Rizvim stood in the doorway and looked. Rias Gremry pinched the bridge of her nose in irritation, mostly because their homeroom teacher was late, and that meant that she was sitting in class, doing nothing while her peerage's familiars worked to increase the amount of paperwork that weighed down the desk in the ORC club room. Paperwork which she would have to deal with sooner or later. She couldn't keep putting it off in favor of observing her target. No, she needed to keep up on her own duties as well as looking out for new members of her peerage. But it was just so boring. Nothing happened here these days, at least nothing to interest the young Gremry heir. At that moment there was a commotion from outside the hall. Students looked up to see the teacher walking in. He was a fairly short man, with spiky brown hair, pulled back in a ponytail. He had a long scar over the bridge of his nose. Rias knew it was from his previous job as a kendo instructor. Something to do with an overzealous student. His name was Irika, and he was without a doubt the most unassuming teacher she'd ever seen. However, standing next to him was probably the polar opposite of him. Her eyes took in his appearance as Irika introduced him to the class. "Good morning, everyone. We have a new transfer student today." He was tall, easily 6 feet, with tan skin and golden blonde hair. It was very unruly, as if nothing stood a chance of taming it. He's coming from America of all places, so he might need a bit of time to adjust. I hope you all get along with him. The young man, whose mischievous blue eyes were shining out from underneath his hair, bowed slightly to the class. "Hey everyone. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Nankase. I hope you'll all be willing to be my friends in the near future," he finished on a low note which sent shivers up several spines. His voice was rich and purring like nothing they'd heard before. It almost seemed to resonate around the room. No, it did resonate around them, deep and commanding. His confident smile showed long sharp canines and shining white teeth. Rias noticed that he had 3 black marks on either cheek, like whiskers. They lent him a roguish appearance, which was already reinforced by his elegant bow. All around the class Rias heard whispers burst like overfull balloons, girls chatting between each other at the new student. She imagined that the room heated up a bit, as though all the girls and even 1 or 2 of the boys needed to fan themselves. Naruto straightened and glanced to the teacher. "Where would you like me to sit, sensei?" he asked with a slight smirk. Rias glanced around as half the class sighed dreamily. She didn't really know what to make of it, but one thing was for sure, Kiba was going to have to fight for his title now. Pretty boy number 2 had officially arrived, and boy was he a fine piece of eye candy. She had to admit he was the best-looking boy she'd seen this side of the underworld. She was sure that if she was human she'd be just like all the other fangirls at that moment, swooning over his beauty. Rias turned around to look at Akino, who was smiling at Naruto, obviously disrobing him with her eyes. Akino, really? She supposed she couldn't blame her queen for admiring his looks as long as she didn't try and get him to join the peerage. She didn't have room for just anyone. "Well, Naruto, you can take that seat there, next to Tsubaki," Irika said. "Tsubaki? Would you raise your hand?" Naruto's gaze turned to the girl who sat near the back. Tsubaki's hand rose and Naruto nodded, moving over to the desk and sitting down. She can also show you around the school and tell you how things work around here. She's a member of the student council, and she knows how we operate. Irika turned to the rest of the class. Now I believe it's time to get this day started. Everyone open your Algebra 2 textbook to page 76. Rias pulled her eyes away from the new student and opened her math book. Unbeknownst to her, Naruto's blue eyes turned in her direction. Naruto watched the girl with the crimson hair out of the corner of his eye. She was beautiful. He'd never seen many girls before, even though his godfather had been very informative on the subject. The only girls he was really acquainted with were his few relatives and his mother and the maids, but they didn't count. He could feel that she was a devil. And he could easily sense that there were at least 3 others in the room. The girl Tsubaki was certainly one of them, and so was the alluring dark-haired one sitting a few seats behind him. And there was something off about her besides being a devil. He wasn't sure what it was, but he would find out. Maybe I can actually have some fun now. I've spent my whole life cooped up in that stupid castle without being able to leave. It wasn't so bad when Dad was still around, but as soon as he was gone, Rizvim and the others started messing with me and my sacred gear. It's a good thing Mom kept them from doing anything too drastic, but damn! It's good to be out of there. He smiled and glanced at his book, already open on the table. None of this was hard. Child's play. I could do this whole book in a day, wouldn't even have to bother with scratch paper. In hindsight, he might need to tone his abilities down slightly. He doubted if it would be wise to reveal that he could do complex mathematical equations in his head instantly. Such an act would draw unnecessary attention to himself. Then again, I still want to have a good time, and you can't drink blood without piercing the flesh. I'll need to talk to these devils before they go and report anything strange. Naruto's smile turned noticeably feral. I wonder if I should try my hand at seducing some of these girls. That would be a challenge. He channeled minute amounts of vampiric energy into his nose, heightening his sense of smell by 100 times normal. Immediately he was able to pinpoint the last devils in the room. A shorter girl, with dark hair and pale skin who sat in the front row. Naruto realized that she and Tsubaki had some kind of connection to each other. Maybe Tsubaki is part of her peerage, and if that is true, then I'd also be willing to bet that the strange devil girl who is so aroused right now is teamed with the redhead. I think I'll try my hand at getting close to those two before I make direct contact with them. See how long it takes them to realize their servants are mine. Naruto pulled his power and around himself a bit tighter. No point in trying to hunt the 2 girls if he revealed himself as a supernatural being. And the fun begins. Kushina stared at the empty room. Her son was nowhere to be found. And as far as she knew, that could only mean one thing. He'd made good on his promise to get out. She honestly didn't blame him. His blood burned too hot to be contained inside the castle for long, and he'd been itching to get out for years. She just wished now that she'd been overseeing it. There was no telling how much trouble he could get in unsupervised. He was a prodigy in every sense of the word, smart and quick to learn, twice as clever as the average devil and 4 times as manipulative. He was relatively unambitious, but at the same time, when something caught his interest, he was as stubborn as a dragon. She wasn't at all sure what he was up to. He could be in the underworld, the human realm, wandering the dimensional rift, anything really. The only place she didn't think her son would get into was heaven. She hoped to Satan that he didn't try to get into heaven. If he did try, it wouldn't be too long before he succeeded. And she really didn't want that particular headache. Beside her, Rizvim was having a panic attack over his disappearance. And for good reason too. He was their secret weapon, the trump card against the new Devil Kings. If Naruto was gone, then so was any chance of them defeating the leaders of the new Devil faction. Rizvim wasn't stupid, as much as he acted like it. He knew that Cerzex could kill him easily. Likewise, the old Leviathan and Beelzebub knew how weak they were in comparison to their new counterparts, dangerously so. Naruto was crucial to their plans. His abilities were the key to defeating such powerful opponents without suffering great losses. But if the blonde hybrid vanished, there was no way they could influence him. Not that she let them do that. Naruto had complete faith in her, and she refused to let her cousin or his allies taint him. Her husband and Jiraiya were bad enough. We have to get him back, Rizvim shouted. She smacked him into a wall. How do you intend on doing that? Even I can't track him if he used my husband's techniques to escape. We will have to wait until he shows himself or causes enough of a stir to hone in on. Oh. Shit! Why'd you hit me? The others are going to throw a fit, he shouted. Kushina used a sizable magic circle to summon one of her servants. A moment later, a slender woman was standing before her. Find my son. Search the underworld from top to bottom. Get the others if you need help. If you can't find him, check over the human realm. She waved her hand and his servant vanished in a flash of red. As for you, she sighed, turning to Rizvim. You need to learn that my son doesn't belong to you or even me. He is first and foremost a free devil. Your group is fortunate that he didn't leave sooner. With that, she left the room, a small smile hovering about her lips now. It wasn't a bad thing for her son to be out in the world. Maybe he'd find a few servants of his own or even a mate. Who could know? He was the strongest descendant of Lucifer to date. Anything could happen. Better yet, he might make contact with a few fellow devils. If he allied himself with the new devil faction, then she would at last be able to reconcile with the Juka and Cerzex. Kushina blocked out the annoying rants of her cousin. She really would kill him one day if he didn't get killed by someone else sooner. Naruto smirked. Watching the members of the ORC go about their daily business was interesting. They were obviously devils, as he'd already found out, but it seemed like they were all part of the same peerage, and that of course meant that the other girls were from a second one. It was curious, seeing how devils were very territorial normally. To have two different peerages of two separate high-class devils in the same school was well curious. He didn't know how they got along. He rarely found any common ground with other devils. His mother obviously didn't count, and neither did his godfather. He despised Raizvim and his cronies/cohorts, whatever they were. So to see almost a dozen devils interacting in a peaceful manner without conflict was simply amazing. Raizvim never got through a conversation without breaking something or someone. His mother didn't either for that matter. But other than that he was content. It wasn't boring here like it was at home. Here there was a flurry of activity. Everyone neatly organized and studious. It reminded him of the video games he used to play. The cool strategy ones his dad gave him when he was little. Everything could be micromanaged with only a little effort on his part. He found to his surprise that his uncle's archenemy was rather popular here. Seeing how the head of the ORC club was Rias Gremory, and that made her the sister of Surzex, who was about Raizvim's least favorite person other than him. And on the other side of the school was Sona Citri, who was the little sister to Seraphal Leviathan. Now that had been icing on the cake if he could make friends with these two powerful peerages. Well, not very powerful by his standards, then he could get back as the stupid Chaos Brigade and all the idiots who hated him. Raizvim, his fellow old farts, the old devil faction, and the rest of the stuck-up arrogant bastards who thought he was some tool. They would all be having heart attacks at the moment. And when he allied himself with their enemies' sisters show them who the boss is. He'd even enjoy it. Getting close to the two peerages would be entertaining and challenging, at least he hoped so. While he figured he wouldn't be bored for a while, he wished that the devils would at least make it hard for him. He always loved to worm his way into the middle of things. A little disorder never hurt anyone. Naruto scratched at the small of his back. He was getting a bit uncomfortable in the tree he was hiding in. So that meant it was time to make some mischief. Sona grumbled to herself about a certain, soon-to-be pawn, who was being a royal pain in her ass. Saji was just so immature. And he was a closet pervert. If it wasn't for his honor, there would be a perverted quartet instead of a trio. And she'd still have to deal with his eccentricities. Behind her Tsubaki walked at attention. Her queen had just finished showing the new student around the school and explaining how everything worked. He'd taken it all in and then been gone like smoke on the breeze. Tsubaki gave her the impression that this was a rather impressive feat. Vanishing out from under a devil's nose was no small feat for a human, but it matched his personality. From what Tsubaki said, Naruto was a free-spirited, fun-loving person who was driven by his own wants and desires. He was intelligent, and if Tsubaki's hunch was correct, powerful. Her queen hadn't been able to pinpoint it, but she claimed that something was different about the new student. Sona was inclined to agree. Naruto was certainly an odd individual. She would be watching him very closely. After all, she still had a lot of room in her peerage. Rias wasn't the only one who needed members. Sona reached the door to the student council room and opened it. She stepped through and screamed as freezing cold water drenched her. Then she was bopped upside the head as a plastic bucket bounced off her. She stood there, completely frozen for several moments, unable to comprehend what had happened. President? Tsubaki asked hesitantly. Find him, Sona growled. Find whoever the hell set this up. I want him hogtied on my desk inside the hour. Yes, President. Tsubaki entered the room, looking for clues. At the same time Sona closed the door with a loud snap. Then she created a magic circle above herself, and used it to instantly dry her clothes. When that was done she joined her queen in the search for evidence. Naruto snickered to himself as he watched Sona get drenched in cold water. They couldn't find him, of course, even though he was in the same room. He was too good at hiding his presence from them. One of the benefits of being part vampire. The elusive race of bloodsuckers were expert in evasion and stealth. Hiding even his outrageously large presence was child's play. Especially considering that the two girls likely weren't looking for magical tampering. He grinned as he watched them. He'd been expecting shock from Sona, but not quite that reaction. Apparently her pride as a high-class devil had been wounded. It was a real shame they wouldn't catch him unless he wanted to be caught. There was always that, but for now he was happy, playing tricks on the poor unsuspecting devils. Tsubaki searched the room for clues, but soon found herself in a sticky situation literally. Someone had dabbed a strong adhesive onto the undersides of every drawer handle and all the cabinets. The results were her hands being liberally coated in the sticky clear substance. She immediately thought it was superglue, but it wasn't drying until it came in contact with her skin, which meant it was either heat or moisture activated. She fumbled as she accidentally placed her hand on top of Sona's desk only to have her hand stick there. Her scowl deepened as she yanked upwards. The glue held and so did the table. However, her momentum brought her crashing back with the table on top of her. She grunted in annoyance as Sona moved over to her. What happened? Glue, she responded. Glue has been put on all the drawer and cabinet handles. What the hell? Sona was looking down to where her feet were now firmly glued to the floor. Apparently whatever the adhesive was, had been dribbled in select places to entrap them. She cursed under her breath and attempted to yank free, succeeding but suffering the same fate as her queen. Her overzealous yank removed her shoe and sent her careening backwards to land flat on her back. Sona experienced the unpleasant feeling of some sticky substance clinging to her right arm, her leg, just below her skirt and soaking into her hair. Naruto restrained the urge to chuckle evilly. Sona had just gone and glued herself to the floor, priceless. I knew this place would be fun. Oh, the expression on her face. She would murder me if she found out. Guess I should get going before she starts getting pissed. He moved silently through the room, dropping a candy wrapper and one particular puddle of glue. Sona and Tsubaki didn't even notice the quiescent shadow, sliding past them and out of the room. However, a full half an hour later they did notice the peppermint wrapper lying conspicuously near one wall and a puddle of glue. It was the same kind of candy that Saji was constantly driving them all crazy with, the constant crunching sound which drove them insane while they tried to finish their paperwork. The same kind of candy that had been banned due to this annoyance. Sona and Tsubaki, to put it lightly, were livid. There was a commotion in the halls near the second-year locker rooms. Kiba, knight of Rias's peerage, had found himself mobbed by 7 different girls. At first he'd been confused. This confusion had quickly turned into abject horror. All of them, 2 first years, a second year, and 4 third years had letters addressed to them from him. Oh hell. Kiba, is it true that you've been watching me practice at track? Did you really mean what you said about wearing tighter clothes? Kiba-kun. You actually like magic girls too. Can you go to the Magic Girl Con next week? Are you sure you only want red panties for your art project? I have plenty of other colors. Did you actually ask me out on a date? Oh no. Not this, what is happening? I've never even said hello to half of you. His thoughts ran wild. He must have been pranked. This was all some elaborate setup. These girls never got the letters from him. They must be faking to get revenge for ignoring all the girls in class. Frantically he went about on damage control, but the odds were against him. And that's when he looked up and saw a blonde girl with long pigtails running up to him, her shirt scandalously short and her bust barely contained in a too tight top. She skipped along until she was right next to him, crowding out the other girls. Kiba-kun! She shouted and leaped at him, wrapping her slender yet extremely strong arms around him. He found himself hugged in an iron grip as the girl panted a kiss on his lips and said, "Don't forget about coming over to my place later." Then she was off again, skipping down the hall and out of sight. Still reeling from the kiss, he looked back to the 7 girls and an old American song about 7 women, and stoning came to mind. He recoiled away from the sheer volume of killing intent that suddenly filled the school hallway. He coughed. Now, that wasn't what it looked like. Really? Are we supposed to believe that? Do you think I'm stupid? I call bullshit. I think the pretty boy is getting too big for his britches. Yeah, me too. I think he needs a little help so he doesn't forget about his girlfriend. Kiba turned even as the girls lunged. Too slow. Must escape. Then they fell upon him like ravening wolves. Kiba took his beating while he silently cursed the blonde girl who had made things oh so much worse. I will get my revenge for this. Naruto walked along the hall to the academy lunchroom. Not having any experience with the school yet, he would go there to eat this time. Later he'd find some place that was secluded enough for his tastes. Seeing how he was a vampire, he needed to drink a certain amount of blood, and that couldn't be done safely in a school with devils. They would smell blood from across a room or even further. This time he would just have to go without. Although if I can take one of those girls for my own I could get fresh blood. He closed his eyes in expectation of it. Fresh blood was 5 times as good as refrigerated. First of all, it was hot and thicker when it came from the artery directly. Second, it was tastier. He didn't know why, but it was. And last, he could absorb the magical energy from his victims that way. It wasn't nearly as fast as if he used his sacred gear, but it was still invigorating. A rush of power that made it more than addicting. And that wasn't even counting how it would feel to be drinking from a beautiful girl, lips pressed to her neck, her mouth open in a silent moan. He sighed dreamily and opened his eyes, turning into the lunchroom. It was filled with students from every grade. Most were too engrossed in their meals or conversations to notice him, but he still drew plenty of attention as it was, particularly from Sona and her peerage, or at least the members who were there. At one table were Sona, Tsubaki, Saji, and a girl with long white wavy hair. He didn't know her name. He realized they were looking at him curiously as he made his way into the cafeteria. Should I? I guess it couldn't hurt to go over. Might even be able to tease them a bit. He changed direction and meandered across the room to their table. Sona's eyes tracked him behind her glasses, calculated. Hello, mind if I sit? He asked politely. Sona shook her head. Feel free to join us, Namekaze-san. Feel free to call me Naruto. I get enough of the last names at home. He didn't particularly like it when people addressed him so formally. It made him uncomfortable, regardless how well his mother drilled proper language and manners into him. Very well, Naruto-san. Her violet eyes tracked over him, getting a better picture as he seated himself. I hope you are enjoying yourself here. It's interesting, at least in comparison to what I'm used to, he said truthfully. Sona raised one eyebrow in question. You're the first boy I've encountered so far who prefers school over other activities. It's boring back home. My mom is always working on business and my annoying uncle is constantly trying to rile me up. He sighed. I just had to get out for a while, therefore I enrolled here. So you were homeschooled, I take it? You could say that. Dad was a really great teacher. I skipped quite a few grades. He smirked. Just between you and me, I could probably pass every test in this school without studying. Naruto leaned back. But then it would be over and I'd have to find something else to do. Sona smirked. Like get a job? No, don't need one. I have plenty of money. Although I suppose I'll have to find something to interest me. Can't just spend the rest of my life studying obscure religious texts like some monk in a monastery. All of the devils stiffened, but he pretended not to notice. Anyway, since I'm new to this town, I was wondering if you knew anything fun to do, besides studying obscure religious texts. Sona clarified. Exactly? Naruto grinned and almost immediately realized it was the wrong thing to do. His fangs were still extremely long in comparison to most people and devils were nothing if not observant. Wow, look at those, are those implants? This was Saji, staring wide-eyed at his fangs. Naruto snapped his mouth shut and chuckled uneasily. Sorry about that. It's just I'm not used to being around other kids my age. They're actually a mutation. I was born with them. Most people are kind of freaked out by it. He scratched the back of his head nervously. He was a good liar, excellent actually. Just not with devils. That's interesting, Sona muttered. Must be hard to eat with those in the way. I know it sucks. Sona blinked, Tsubaki gaped at him, and Saji laughed out loud. Naruto grinned again, realizing he made an inadvertent vampire joke. He wondered if it would make them more suspicious or help defuse the situation. Naruto hoped for the latter as Sona was eyeing him with some suspicion. She acts like she's onto me, but she might just be trying to be extra cautious. And she'd probably still tense after the prank I pulled. Naruto glanced at Saji, who didn't look the worse for wear, despite the incriminating evidence he'd left for them to wonder just how much punishment you had to take on a regular basis to act normal afterwards. Or maybe they haven't decided to pass judgment on him yet. Makes me wonder. Naruto opened his lunch and pulled out an apple. It was bright red and shiny. A thought invaded his mind. Devils and an apple, the forbidden fruit. I wonder if I should make things interesting and make sure I always have an apple on me no matter how ridiculous the situation it is. Then I can keep a constant stream of bad vampire puns mixed with references to old religious books that would help me develop a school persona. He eyed Sona as he bit into the apple with an audible crunch. She frowned and he grinned, chewing slowly. This is going to be a fun year. Raynare walked along the street, searching for her target. It wouldn't be too long. She would find him no problem. And then he would act all sweet and nice and innocent. She would ask him out and he'd be shocked. The pervert wouldn't even hesitate. He'd say yes. Then she would let him take her out, then she'd kill him. It was all planned out in her mind. Her boss had given her some discretion on how to kill the sacred gear user. The only points that were universal were the need for a corpse and for that corpse to be Issei Hyodo's. She sighed. Don't really understand why I'm wasting my time on a weak human who hasn't even manifested his sacred gear yet. What's the deal with that? I could be looking for that nun right now, but no, I'm on hunting duty. And he's not even a devil. She grumbled to herself as she turned the corner onto the overpass where Issei should have been. He always took the same route going home and he usually stopped to look out over the bridge for a bit before going on. It would be the perfect apport to. Raynare felt herself drag backwards and upwards. She struggled to rein in the urge to thrust a light spear behind her. She was a human, not a fallen angel. If she let it slip what she was, she might as well sign her own death certificate. There were too many devils in the area to risk revealing what she really was. Letting herself give a short cry, she struggled weakly to escape. It would still feel like the most lively human girl in the world, but whatever had her wasn't human. She could feel that much. It probably wouldn't realize that she was too strong to be human herself. Then she realized something strange. The world around her seemed to be blurring, disappearing, or contorting. Raynare twisted and fell to her, but on a smooth surface. She was no longer on a street corner. Now she was sitting in a medium-sized room. Her violet eyes took in the surroundings. It looked like the typical hotel room. A few dressers, a chest, and a bed. Plus a door that presumably led to the bathroom. She saw no trace of another being there. What the hell? Where am I? You're being pretty clam, aren't you? I mean, I just bent the fabric of reality to bring you here and you asked that? I was expecting frantic pleading for your life or something. Raynare froze. The voice came from behind her. It was deep and strong and sensual in a purring sort of way. She whipped around. Sitting behind her with his back against the wall was a young man. He looked about her own age, but he was blond with tan skin and deep sapphire eyes. Her cheeks turned pink as she took in his form. He was devilishly handsome. Right down to the black marks running back towards his strong jaw. The slitted pupils in his eyes were a dead giveaway to somewhat less than human heritage, and not to mention the fangs which poked out from his top lip. A burst of warmth lit a fire in her chest. She instinctively wanted to keep it together. Now isn't the time to give in to my stupid urges. Who is this guy and what does he want with me? Does he know what I am? Raynare cursed the fact that her patron's sin was lust. She was always weak to handsome men and now was not the time to get hot under the collar. This guy was almost certainly a devil, and would likely kill her if he even suspected what she was. After all, this was a devil-owned town and Fallen weren't welcome without permission. Crow, got your tongue, Fallen? She winced. He knew. I don't know what you're talking about. Blue eyes regarded her coolly, sending a shiver down her spine. Now there isn't any point in trying to lie to me. I followed you, you know. When I smelled you just after lunch, I decided to follow you. I didn't know what a Fallen was doing here, since this is like the most devil-influenced town in the country, which is still human-owned. I figured you were going to do something unpleasant to that poor kid, so I grabbed you. He grinned, showing off his long fangs. Besides, I'm still thirsty, and I've never tried Fallen before. Raynare gritted her teeth. The way he said that just made her body tingle. When did I get so weak? Or is he just strong enough to make me react to him? And if he is that strong, how did I not notice him? Anyone that strong would stick out like a sore thumb. I don't even remember seeing this guy before? Confused Fallen-chan? He asked lazily. Who are you? Now that there's what I like to call confidential information, you know. I could tell you, but then I'd have to find some way to prevent you spilling the beans. His grin widened as if in anticipation of silencing her permanently regardless. You mean killing me? She stated bluntly. Well, if you insist I need to kill you to keep something secret, then you must be one of those songbirds. What did my mom call Fallen who couldn't keep themselves from repeating everything that someone else told them? Oh. I think she called them parrots? He shrugged dismissively. Other than being a devil, there really isn't much you can really say about me, so I have no reason to kill you. Light glinted on his pearly white fangs as he continued, unless you give me a reason. Raynare shifted backwards a bit, needing to put more space between them. If her lust got the better of her, she would be in a very difficult situation. She didn't like devils, but she wasn't at all sure she could resist if he tried something on her. I have a job to do. If I don't get it done, I'm dead. But this devil might just kill me here. I have no way of knowing if he intends on killing me once he has whatever he wants. I'm serious about not killing you. In case you were still wondering. But there is something I wanted from you. Did he just read my mind? He leaned forward and smiled. I know you're probably freaked out right now, but if you give me a few things I want, you can go free as a bird. Just make sure you don't squawk and we'll do fine. What do you want? She asked hesitantly. Oh well. A few things. First, I wanted to know what you Fallen are doing here in Ko Town. Mainly because there are a few people looking for me, and if you cause a big stir here, I'm going to have to beat a hasty retreat. Second, I want you to stop trying to kill people. Especially students at a school that I attend. That will cause enough problems on its own. But I'm pretty sure that the devils in the school are keeping an eye on your target. Raynare went pale as he continued. The last thing I needed, well, let's not bother talking about it since you're not leaving this room till I get it. A fiendish smirk crossed his lips as he lunged forward. She tried to move out of the way, but it didn't do any good. He was on top of her in a flash. His powerful muscles held her to the floor like iron manacles. Damn, he was strong. She struggled to break free, but it didn't do any good. He was holding her effortlessly, still smirking down at her. Come on, Fallen-chan. It'll feel better if you just relax. His face dipped down, nearing her neck. A soft bit at her skin caused her face to burn crimson, and her instincts roared back, demanding to let him ravish her. Raynare gave in to the rapidly building pleasure. She allowed herself to go limp under him while she gazed into his slitted eyes. That's better, he growled as he bent down again, pushing his face into the crook of her neck. A moan escaped her as she felt his lips kissing her throbbing artery. Then pain bit sharply as his fangs plunged deep into her flesh. His hands gripping her arms tightened as his lithe body pressed down. She couldn't fight him. Her core was hot and the pain excited her. He was drinking her blood. What the fuck, he isn't a devil. He's a vampire. The thought was unexpectedly pleasant, probably because it felt so good. His fangs sent lances of pain through her neck and shoulder, but at the same time the contact was driving her out of her mind. Raynare gasped as she lost control of her powers, her illusion shattering. She felt him withdraw as a tearing sound filled the room. Her wings were free, but that small relief wasn't noticeable. Her old proportions had returned and these clothes were now uncomfortably tight. Now, Fallen-chan, I've had my little taste, and I do mean little, so now I'd like my questions answered. If you're helpful, I might help you with your problem. He smiled down at her, showing off his bloody fangs. Raynare felt his fingers trace up the slope of her breasts, barely hindered by the straining fabric, to where he'd bitten. Then he held 2 fingers to the puncture wounds. The sudden pain turned quickly into pleasure, drawing a whimper from her. She closed her eyes, wanting to savor the sensation before he withdrew again. But he didn't. What he did do was proceed to rub his fingers back and forth while leaking something warm into her. It felt like he was channeling magical energy, except for some reason he wasn't using a magic circle. And it was amazing, like she suddenly dropped into a hot spring. First question, and do answer quickly or I might retract my aura. What is your name? R.A. Raynare. She managed to say it without moaning. Not focusing on the pleasure was as hard. Next question. How many Fallen are in the area with you and what are their names? He moved and his other hand caressed her thigh, moving up under her skirt, tempting her. She struggled to recall their names, though the haze of pleasure and annoyance. Couldn't he just get it over with and stop torturing her? There are 3 others. Middlet, Kara Warner, and Donasik. No others? He raised an eyebrow. You must have been very confident in your skills thinking that 4 Fallen could infiltrate Code Town and kill someone without getting caught. Tell me what your purpose here was. To kill a nun? There's a girl coming to town shortly. We were told she possessed the rings of twilight healing. I was to extract them and seal them inside myself for later use. Raynare bit back a moan as his hand smoothed over her thigh, coming to rest over her panties, which he rubbed experimentally. And why target that boy? Raynare mumbled, a threat has a sacred gear. Boss wanted him dead just in case. Good. Now about your friends. Do you care for any of your fallen angels? Not my friends, she managed to say. Care Warner, she's alright, he hummed in thought. Okay, so you wouldn't mind if those other 2 died, right? He sounded a bit too pleased by that. No, excellent. Then I'll have something to occupy me other than school and messing with the devils around town. A curious expression came over him. I was just thinking, Fallen John. I'm not going to let your friends kill anyone, and so your mission is almost defiantly going to be a failure. I bet your boss won't be too happy about that. He wouldn't, she admitted. Although in reality he most likely killed them for their failure. Okay then. I have a proposition for you, Raynare. You become my servant, and do anything I want. And in exchange, I'll make sure your boss never kills you for this failure. Abruptly all pleasure she was feeling vanished, leaving her quite cold under him. He pulled back, releasing her. Bewildered, she sat up, clutching at her neck where there wasn't even a ghost of warmth. She saw her tormentor sitting against the wall again, grin gone as well. What was? I withdrew my power from you and stopped pleasuring you in any way. He shrugged. I asked you a serious question just now. I could have made you answer in the affirmative using your lust, but then it wouldn't mean anything, and you'd probably hate me afterwards for taking advantage of your weakness. So I pulled back so you can think about it yourself. He crossed his arms as a small smile found its way to his lips again. Raynare just had one question. Why? Oh, for quite a few reasons actually. One of them is simple. I'm what you might call a seducer. At least that's what my godfather called me. I take great pleasure in breaking down people's walls. If you're shy, I get a kick out of opening you up. If you're a bitch, I'll just make me want to cut you open to show your sensitive side. If, like you, I think you need to have your goals readjusted, I'll readjust them. I like you, don't ask me why. Some people I like and some people I don't. I see you as a good girl, so I decided to act. He scratched his chin and pondered his next words for a moment, then said, another reason for having you serve me is a wealth of information on the fallen. I've been stuck at my home since I was born. I haven't really been out of the house my whole life until now, so I need someone who is willing to tell me what I want to know and yet keep my own whereabouts secret. Then there's the part where I think you're attractive, and I wouldn't at all mind being able to drink your blood whenever I get thirsty. His small smile widened into a feral grin. I wouldn't mind doing other things with you if you wanted. Raynare blinked. You're being honest? What reason would I have not to be? I mean, unless I'm one of those sick bastards who gets pleasure out of breaking people's spirits. I could be one of them. He shrugged again as if saying you never know. She frowned. She knew that it was entirely possible. Her boss was actually just that kind of man. But was this guy one of them? He'd practically kidnapped her right before she was about to talk to her target. So he obviously had some concern for him, or was telling the truth about not wanting attention drawn to him, or the town in which he was living. She supposed that he might be allied with the devils here, and this was her interrogation before he handed her over to them. This might be his way of offering her a safe way out. That was of course assuming that he and the devils were working together. There was also the possibility that he just wanted to get her under his control for a steady supply of blood. She knew a vampire who worked for the Gregories. He was a foul-mouthed little bloodsucker, but he certainly could give her a run for her money. Provided he drank fresh blood once a week. She knew that to stay healthy vampires usually needed to drink once every 2 days. And to be satisfied twice a day was actually more realistic. Then again, would I mind if he bit me? It felt so good the first time, and he said he only took a bit. It might be worthwhile joining him if he was interested in drinking my blood often. Raynare briefly wondered where her complete lack of loyalty to her own faction came from, but dismissed it. She was under no illusions about her place in the ranks. She had only one set of wings and was under the command of a fallen who wanted to restart the endless war between factions. Without any connections or way to get out from under his direct command, she would eventually be punished along with him. Azazel would punish them all, even though many of them were only following orders. She probably wouldn't be too bad off, but that was assuming she lived long enough to be punished in the first place. Then she would likely be relegated to some position even lower than the one she had now, with no opportunity to advance for a few hundred years at least. All in all, it was one of those, damned if you do, damned if you don't situations she heard so much about from Donasek. Now there was someone who had more than his fair share of screw-ups to his name, and she'd be right there with him. Raynare looked into the blue slitted eyes that were offering a different kind of servitude. And she had to wonder, was it better to go with the hell that she knew was coming or the hell she knew nothing about? He hadn't even revealed his name. Everything she had on the guy was barely circumstantial. He was a vampire. He was stronger, much stronger than her. And he seemed to be moderately sane, if mischievous. She made up her mind. May I at least know the name of my new master? Naruto. Naruto what? He smirked and leaned forward. Before you know my true nature, I need more than just you asking a leading question. I need something that guarantees your service. What is that? She shifted uneasily. I don't know how vampires do that sort of thing. Well, if I did it the vamp way, I would just drink enough of your blood and magic to weaken your soul ties, then I would inject trace amounts of my own soul into yours. Being more powerful than you, my soul shard as it's called, would dominate your mind and make you utterly subservient to me. Your connection to me would make sure I didn't even have to speak for you to know what I desired. Raynare gulped. But that isn't any fun. I don't want some mindless lackey. I don't need some scantily clad maid/fuck toy. I want a servant who can think for herself and can improve in her abilities, thus being able to help me to a greater extent. Using vampire methods wouldn't be to my or your benefit. He leaned back. I could use the human magician's method of gaining subservience. I know one in particular which would be very effective. But again, it's damaging to the servant. Naruto sighed. That leaves only one. I'll use the devil method. But not the new devil method. I don't have a set of evil pieces, so that option is out. Raynare watched as he raised a hand and used one finger, now tipped with razor-sharp claw, to slice open his wrist. Naruto spoke as he moved towards her. This is an old way of enslaving others that the original devil families used, except my father altered it. Instead of killing you when you disobey, it merely paralyzes you or sends a jolt of my magical energy through your system, rendering you a. He stopped for a second while she looked up at him. His eyes met hers again as he pushed her down on the floor with one hand. That's it. It would render you incapable of disobeying me for quite a while. Since you are a fallen with your primary sin being lust, anyone who can dominate your power completely as I can will be able to force you to do what I want. He winked at her. And it would be very enjoyable not being able to disobey. She stifled a complaint as her wings were stuck between her back and the cold floor. Naruto moved his claw to his still bleeding wrist and dipped it in blood. Seeing her look of faint disgust, he sighed. Don't be so dramatic. This little scratch is nothing. I could heal instantly at will. However, I need some kind of medium to write with, and I don't see any magically infused ink lying around here, do you? She shook her head. Good, now then this ritual I'm using will bind you to me indefinitely. Basically you will be bound to me for the rest of your life. Unless I die or decide to use another ritual to nullify the first. He looked down at her, frowning. I almost forgot. Needs to be on bare skin. With a judicious tug, he ripped the front of her schoolgirl uniform open. She mentally approved of this, both because she preferred to be wearing less clothing anyway and because the uniform was exceedingly tight on her original form's more gifted body. She just wished he'd pull the damn bra off, since that extra cup size difference between her human form and her fallen one was starting to hurt. Naruto either needed more space to write or he sensed this unspoken request because his claw snicked through the thin fabric of her bra. The two sides flying open at the elastic was severed. Then without further ado, he began to write. It tickled and she had to bite her lip to prevent from giggling. She refused to do that in this situation. His claw traced a circle that started just above her belly button and then traced around her sides and went slightly under her breasts. All the while he continued to refresh the ink from his wrist. Several minutes went by before he was done. Raynare was about to sit up and look at what he'd wrought when he leaned over her again. Their eyes met for a second. This is either going to feel like the best orgasm of your life, or it's going to feel like being ripped apart by an angry fire elemental, he said calmly. But it's necessary, so on the off chance it's the latter. Naruto kissed her on the lips, earning a short whimper from her as her fallen instincts once again prompted her to demand further action. However, as she tried to push up to return the kiss, she found herself quite literally paralyzed. I used a bit of vampire magic to freeze you. That way you don't interrupt the ritual when it starts, screaming, or thrashing, the usual stuff. He tilted his head to the side, smiling warmly. Now this is going to hurt a little. Naruto leaned down once more and whispered in her ear. I'm using yokai energy called chakra to complete the seal. Don't ask me why, since I don't know, but it requires that I bite you for some reason. She attempted to settle herself, imagining that it would hurt many times worse than the bite he'd inflicted earlier, but when she felt his teeth sinking into her, all she felt was a massive burst of some energy. Not fallen or devil or even vampire. It poured through her, seeming to pool in her stomach. That's where he was writing. What is going? Oh, Raynare cried out as white fire erupted from every cell in her body, and she realized that Naruto's analogy was perfectly accurate. Being torn apart by fire elementals just about summed it up. She screamed even as she was unable to move. She screamed herself hoarse as lines of liquid fire spread and shifted over her skin, interlocking and searing themselves into her. It seemed to go on forever until it quite suddenly bit off like a badly tuned piano being hit with a sledgehammer. At the same time, whatever paralyzation spell Naruto had placed on her wore off and he quickly pulled back. She gasped, taking in a huge breath and using it to let out one last scream as her tenderized nerves recovered. Then she just lay there, waiting. You okay? Do I fucking look okay? Well, Raynare threw herself into a sitting position, lining up her fist to knock his face in, but quickly rethought the action as a wave of pure ecstasy overwhelmed her. She fell back with a muffled moan. And that would be the yokai energy kicking in. Any time to try to do something to consciously hurt me, directly or indirectly, the seal will activate and flood your body with yokai energy. Now for someone like me who has the ability to absorb any kind of energy from just about anything, There isn't much I don't know about the weaknesses of the different factions. He held up a hand within view, counting off each finger. 1. Angels are weak against vampires and certain devils. 2. Most devils are weak against angels and some fallen. 3. Vampires are weak against devils. 4. Yokai are weak against angels. 5. Fallen are weak against yokai. He smirked. Oh, and all of them are weak against dragons. When yokai energy interacts with the nervous system and fallen angels, it causes the signals to get mixed up. Depending on how it's used, it can cause immense pain, or debilitating pleasure. It also widely depends on the kind of yokai and by extension the kind of chakra they use. I can purify yokai into a yin and yang chakra, which can then be used in jutsu. Naruto gestured to himself. Me and my father both have this ability, and my dad is one of the few people to ever use jutsu, which are special techniques that can only be accessed using pure chakra. Raynare managed to sit up again. What are you? I'm half devil, 1/4 vampire, and 1/4 human. And who are you? She frowned. Now that you've sealed me or whatever, my full name is Naruto Uzumaki Namekaze Vosk. Uzumaki from my mother, who is a full-blooded devil. Namekaze from the human side of my dad. And Vosk from the vampire side. Raynare's eyes were wide. But Namekaze, that's the name of the, she gulped, the human clan that used real sorcery. And Vosk is that's like royalty in the vampire families. You're right on both counts, but you didn't comment on my Uzumaki heritage. I've never heard of them, she admitted. Oh well, allow me to enlighten you now that you can't tell my secret. Uzumaki is the human name given to the great devil house of Lucifer. Raynare's eyes bugged out of her skull. Lucifer? Yep. Pretty cool, huh? I'm a noble on my human side. A side branch royal on my vampire side and main branch royalty on my devil side. Actually, if you want to be technical about it, I'm Lucifer's heir. Naruto flashed his trademark grin and put his hands behind his head. Feel free to bow. She blinked and then ducked her head. Yes, Lucifer-sama, he coughed. Okay, just kidding about the bowing part. You never have to bow or call me Sama unless I end up taking you to meet someone official. I hate honorifics. I get enough of that from my stupid uncle. Who is? She wasn't quite sure. She wanted to know which stupid uncle he was referring to. Rizvim Lucifer. He'd my mom's cousin. He's also a jackass, but I don't want to talk about him. I left home because I was tired of being locked up like some old artifact. I needed to stretch my legs, find adventure, commit genocide, and get a harem. You know. The usual stuff that Lucifer's heirs want to do when they grow up. Committing genocide doesn't seem like something you would do. Yeah, I was kidding about that part, but I've been seriously thinking about building a harem, and the adventure is a definite yes. Raynare looked up at his puzzled. So what are you doing at the moment, and where do I fit in the scheme of things now? Naruto gestured to her, and Raynare suddenly felt herself sliding across the floor to him. She squealed as his arms wrapped around her, holding her tightly. A shiver ran down her spine as he growled in her ear. Right now? I'm just happy I can drink that fallen blood of yours, she moaned slightly as he bit her neck softly. It's better than anything I've had before. Raynare bit her lip to stop her reaction to his hands, which had moved up under her, cupping them lightly. Feel free to make those wonderful noises, you know. With that, his fangs were buried in the hollow of her neck. Raynare closed her eyes and let herself relax against his broad chest as he drank deeply. I don't own any part of Naruto or DxD, Raynare moaned as sharp fangs slid slowly into her throat. Heat and pleasure, more than she could imagine, it washed through her, bringing a crimson blush to her cheeks as a hard body pressed against her, pinning her in place. She didn't fight back, only adjusting herself to be more comfortable. She wouldn't admit it, but this feeding felt almost as good as sex, which was great because her master was almost always thirsty. Naruto pulled back, licking at the small wound to close it. His eyes, usually a crystal blue, were still the color of blood, the black slit pupil making him seem like a demon as he smirked. It's almost like you wanted me to bite you that time, R-chan, he growled slightly. Could it be you're addicted to the feeling of being bitten? She didn't respond, but brought her hand to check the bite mark. Just like the last 3 times, there was nothing there. His strange ability to mix different energies confounding her yet again. Raynare sighed and dropped her hands and looked into his eyes as they returned to the cerulean orbs of his human form. You're still not answering, R-chan. Naruto pushed forward again, his fangs sinking into flesh again. She gasped as he sucked hard once before releasing her. Well, this Uzumaki wants to know. Yes, okay. Now we have to get to class. Naruto chuckled. Now that just isn't true. He brought his face close to hers, showing off his still dangerously long fangs. I have that little situation taken care of at the moment. What do you mean by that? Simple. He grinned. We are in class right now. You just don't know it. Raynare blinked in confusion. You set up an illusion? How? And won't the devils here notice? Come on. Don't you have any faith in me? If I can forcibly bind a fallen angel to myself using only a bit of blood and magic, I think I can fool a few devils. Just because they're related to the current devil kings doesn't mean they can detect my magic. And besides, school is interesting and all, but we have business to attend to today, and since you are bound to me recently, it's better if you come with. Why did we go to school until lunch, you mean? Only because I wanted to check up on a few plans I have in motion. We're free to go now. She blinked. What plans? For instance, ruining that pretty boy devil's reputation. I've been steadily making him look like a player by delivering forged letters to all of his biggest fangirls, having him accosted by random girls that are different every time. This last time I actually cast an illusion on him. He outright kissed one of them in class. Naruto closed his eye remembering it. That stunned hopeful look on her face was priceless. And his was like shock, confusion, and horror all rolled into one. You're evil. Naruto's lips twisted into a smirk. Well, I am the heir or Lucifer. Anyway, unless you really want me to drain every last drop of your blood, we should get going. He made it sound like he would be more than happy to do that, which he also was. Yo, you're right. Let's go. Then follow me. Issei Hyoto was not happy. Why? You may ask this kind of question. Why would he not be happy when he, the self-proclaimed greatest pervert alive, was being straddled by a girl? Well, it might have something to do with the fact that a large glowing spear made a pure crackling energy sticking in his chest, and this girl was currently twisting it cruelly. Ah, poor human scum. I honestly thought you'd put up a fight, but it seems like you were just a tease. I didn't see any sign of that supposed sacred gear, and you're weak, she pouted cutely. Actually, I should have dragged you back with me instead of killing you. Then I'd just take your sacred gear, whatever it is, Issei screamed hollowly. The light spear was the one lung, making speech and even agonized shouts difficult. Why, you're one whiny human. I take back what I said about you being weak. If you still have enough in you to scream, I'm impressed. She raised one finger to her chin in a pose of intense thought. But now that I think about it, you're still pretty pathetic. When I asked you to come and help me, I didn't even have to fake crying. You just followed like some lost puppy. B-by-TCH. Ooh. Did I just hear that? The human called me a bad name. I think the dirty human needs to be punished. You're obviously enjoying this too much. Issei gasped as the spear was pulled free with a sick squelch and plunged back into his stomach, tearing through flesh with ease. Blood started to pour into his half-cauterized lungs, blocking further speaking completely. Now her voice went low, harsh. You fucking human. You must have done something to Raynare. She was going to kill you this weekend, but you did something. She never came back after she was supposed to ask you out on that date. Donaseek and Calawarner can't find her anywhere, and it's all your fault. She sneered and twisted the blade of light, angling it upward towards his heart. Just die, you filth, and then I can go finish looking for whatever is left of my friend. Issei's mind clouded as he felt the blade leave him again. He knew he was bleeding out. His head fell to the side, his eyes catching on the spreading pool of blood under him. Is this the end of me? I didn't even have a girlfriend. I'm pathetic, just like she said. Standing in front of Naruto naked, Raynare could only feel uncomfortable. She looked down at the floor as his eyes examined her closely. His eyebrows were furrowed as he took in every detail of her nude form. Are you done yet? She asked, fidgeting. She didn't know why she was so shy around him at the moment. She was a fallen angel, damn it. Her sin was lust. So why was she so awkward? Not yet, R.H.on. And why do you call me R.H.on? That's the name of an Egyptian god. She didn't know what to think of her nickname, or maybe it was a pet name? It was hard to tell sometimes how he thought of her. Scratch that. It was nigh impossible to understand how he thought, period. He was smart, but didn't seem to care enough to use his intelligence. He was practical, but acted without thinking, seemingly on purpose, and often did the opposite of what was needed simply because he thought it was more interesting, not to mention the mixed signals he kept sending her. Sometimes she felt like he cared for her even deeply. But just as often she felt every inch his servant. He moved around her like she was his, as if she belonged to him completely. To an extent that appeared possessive. Yet he also didn't care what she did in her free time, as long as it didn't damage him. It was only a day and a half since she'd been what was the description? Taken? She'd decided that it would be in her best interest to serve him, but she was conflicted now. How did he truly see her? Raynare blinked as she realized that Naruto had completely ignored her question in favor of leaving the private room where they'd been. She huffed and looked around the room. It was a large dressing room in the back of a clothing store. They were in the underworld, a place she'd only ventured once, and not since she was a pure angel. That was on a raid shortly before she'd fallen to her lust. She let out another long breath as she waited for her master to return. She sure wasn't leaving this room alone. There were devils swarming around everywhere in this town. Literally. This was a devil town. They'd received quite a few odd and hostile looks from the locals and many curious glances when they noted how subservient she was acting, especially with her status as a fallen angel. Normally she wouldn't treat him with complete deference, but she decided that pride was best left in the mortal realm. If she wanted to be treated with any measure of fairness, she needed to act as his servant. Otherwise she had no guarantee that the devils wouldn't try to do her harm. A moment later Naruto returned with a few articles of clothing. She eyed them with a raised eyebrow. He met her gaze with a smirk, as he placed them on the lone chair in the room. Am I wearing those outside? Do you have a problem with that? She hesitated at his tone of voice. Well, no. But I didn't think we were coming here so you could show me off in expensive lingerie, and you'd be right. 2 of those are for home. The other one needs to be altered slightly before you wear it. He moved forward and grabbed her hand, pulling her into him. She attempted to rein in her instincts, but he had to go and bite at the nape of her neck, not piercing the skin but sending a jolt of pleasure down her spine. Naruto growled. Do you have any idea how much I enjoy the fact that your Regen factor prevents you from dying of blood loss? It's like a vampire's dream come true. He stroked at her as his lips brushed her skin again. Just seeing you naked makes me very thirsty, you know. She went still as his mouth closed over skin and he bit deeply. Raynare strangled her moan before it could leap out of her mouth. What was he thinking? Doing this here was just asking for it. But he didn't seem to care, and she was having a hard time resisting him, or her own impulses. While Naruto drank greedily, she slowly lost the strength in her legs. Raynare almost collapsed as he withdrew minutes later. Damn, you taste good. He closed his eyes and leaned his head on hers. All the stupid years drinking blood packs when I could have had fresh blood. You almost sound annoyed. But I am. He moved back, still holding her while she regained her strength. It's so hard not to take everything and more. You can't imagine how amazing it is. You know, traditionally, royal vampires took everything from their victims, killing them in the process of feeding. Raynare glanced at him as he helped her to the chair where she sat down. Why? Because. His expression turned predatory. Trying to tell a royal vampire to stop drinking when he or she didn't want to would be as pointless ordering a human to stop breathing. And even if you could do it, it would be just as deadly. You're lucky that vampires of my generation have a lot more restraint than our ancestors. His fangs glinted in the overhead light. Otherwise you'd have been dead the first time we met. A shiver went down her back as he straightened. Now. You get dressed in the blue and silver dress. When you're done we can head out. Where exactly are we going? She asked, curious. To visit a nice young devil. His eyes flashed red. Or more precisely, you're going to be visiting a nice young devil. I'll be doing other things. Hours later, Diodora Astaroth was, by far, the most kind and helpful devil Raynare had ever encountered. Only extreme caution and many warnings allowed her to sense the underlying wrongness that the young devil exuded. He was corrupt, evil, and sick in every sense of the word. However, if she hadn't known Naruto and had met the Astaroth heir, she would have proclaimed him to be the kindest, most generous devil in all the underworld. Truly, Naruto was a breed apart for being able to see past the impressive facade. I must say, Raynare-san, I was surprised that you knew who had supplied the information on the nun's location. I thought my part was anonymous. Diodora smiled winningly, even though they both knew he was less surprised and more horrified. While they spoke politely, they both knew, though her knowledge was only recently acquired, that he was much less benevolent than he made himself out to be. Pardon me for saying so, my lord. She mentally thanked Calawarner for drilling this sort of servile manner into her, as she gave a deep bow. However, both myself and those who serve under me are much better informed than most believe. Knowledge and rank are neither inclusive nor exclusive of each other, and we would be poor servants if we didn't know our employer. Indeed, was all he said as they walked down a long hall to his personal chambers. But correct me if I'm wrong, Raynare-san, but she isn't due to arrive for a few days. That is true, my lord. However, it was Danasik who mentioned that we had no way of contacting you or letting you know when we had completed our assigned task. Knowing your enjoyment in such things, we thought it unwise to kill the girl until we were sure of your wishes. Having never heard from you personally, we couldn't know if your orders had been changed in passing to us. He seemed to consider this for several moments, his expression hardly changing. Then he appeared to realize something. Wait. You said that she wasn't due for days, yet you were questioning your ability to get in touch? Does that mean she came early? Raynare nodded, continuing the lies that Naruto had instructed her to use. He wanted her to play him out on a string for as long as possible, and if she could, get him alone in his private rooms. She didn't know why this was important, but apparently it was. Diodora looked excited at this change in plans as he continued to look at the floor in front of them as they walked. Both of them were almost to the large double doors that stood between them and his rooms by the time he looked up. Tell me, what is she like? Raynare blinked and looked away as if thinking. That was one thing Naruto didn't know and therefore couldn't coach her on. However, she had been an Angel once and knew her fair share about nuns. She is very reserved and calm. Innocent to a fault. She wouldn't know evil if it bit her. And she's quite devoted. Really? A barely disguised and highly unpleasant chuckle escaped him before he regained his composure. Yes, that is quite excellent. I will enjoy this even more than I anticipated. Has she kept her long hair? The question wasn't probing. Raynare guessed that he was far too caught up in his perverted fantasies to care about discretion. She answered in what she thought would be the most desirable fashion. Naruto commanded that the devil be kept in good spirits, and so she would tell him whatever she thought he wanted to hear. It's nearly to her rear at this point. And still blonde? She hasn't dyed her hair? A crazed look had entered his eye, making her shift uncomfortably as the double doors opened in front of them. Raynare was struggling to rein in her distaste at this point. The young devil was drooling. She gagged inwardly, thinking, he's disgusting. I'd rather bathe in shit than let this twisted man touch me. As blonde as spun gold, my lord. His eyes snapped to the side. Perfect, not that I mind darker hair, but only 2 of my girls are blonde, you must understand. And none have such beautiful hair as she. As a matter of fact, yours is very nice. Diodora's eyes acquired a gleam that made her skin crawl. Since you are serving me, Why don't you help your master? My servants are all off on assignments at the moment. Usually I would keep at least one of them back for entertainment, but alas, duties precede pleasure. She was unable to repress her frown at his crude and thinly veiled request. Naruto hadn't mentioned anything about this. She suspected that he wouldn't have sent her in alone if he knew the Astaroth heir would try to come on to her. And that made for problems. He was a high devil, as young as he was, and he wouldn't take kindly to being denied. Unless he has proper incentive to keep his hands off me. He isn't stupid. The fact that he came up with this plan in the first place proves that he has at least some intelligence. I must apologize, my lord. She flicked her eyes to the side as she bowed deeply. She was in his room, just as Naruto wanted. What now, Naruto-sama? Raynare straightened and spoke coolly, hoping he would buy her excuse. I must decline your offer. You see, I am working for your lordship. However, I belong to another. My body is his only. She bowed again, somewhat stiffly as he frowned. A devil? How unfortunate. I could show you such a good time. Surely he isn't someone too important. But he is. 1,000 apologies, but he is above yourself in rank. It was true. Naruto was the heir of Lucifer and therefore above even the 4 devil kings in rank, so she felt it was quite safe to say he was above the devil standing before her. That's highly unlikely. You know who I am. I am the heir of the Astaroth house. Unless you serve ahead of one of the devil houses, I don't see how you could. Raynare noted that he sounded highly miffed, if uneasy. But you see, she does serve someone higher than you. And technically I am the head of a devil house. Both Raynare and Diodora snapped their heads in the direction of the voice, only to see Naruto. He was standing in the open door to Diodora's private rooms. With a bang, both doors slammed shut and the magical sealing array activated, locking all of them inside. Naruto smirked as he stepped forward, keeping his eyes locked on his fellow devil. Well now, Dio-san. You must be feeling a bit puzzled right now. Naruto chuckled darkly as Diodora stepped backwards. You're the one that they wanted to absorb the energy from that girl. You're Raizathem's nephew. What are you doing here? Naruto paused and struck a thinker's pose. Allow me to enlighten you, Diodora. I am here to kill you. Do try not to run. I might miss and end up making a big mess before connecting. The Astaroth's expression perfectly matched Raynare's as he turned to run. Naruto calmly raised his arms, hands directed at him with fingers curled like claws. Then the entire room was lit up with blinding light as jagged violet lighting shot from his fingertips and tore past the fleeing devil. Diodora turned at the last moment as Naruto adjusted his aim. Suddenly there was a violent hum filling the air as a green barrier interposed itself between them. The next bolt of lightning dissipated into sparks as it hit the livid green magic circle. Diodora laughed. Ha! I have power now too. It just takes a second to draw on. You won't defeat me that easy. My power comes directly from Raizatham. Don't be full of yourself, you sick retard. Naruto spat as he vanished into thin air. Fuck! Diodora screamed as lightning crashed into his back, burning a great swath of devastation through him and almost cutting him in half. However, at the last second he flung his arm out straight, launching a green ball of compressed energy. It buzzed towards Naruto, who, smirking again, caught it on his open palm. Maelstrom absorption, draining touch. As they watched, the green sphere increased in size till it was half as wide as he was tall. Then it rapidly shrank, seeming to be siphoned off into emerald streams of energy which wrapped around Naruto, sinking into his skin. A second later it was gone and Naruto's eyes had gone completely black, his skin bleaching to a pallor close to parchment. His smirk morphed into a grin, showing off his razor-sharp fangs. Diodora watched as he collapsed to the ground, his own skin pale as death. How? Naruto didn't respond for a moment. His black eyes closed for a moment before opening. The obsidian color faded back to blue. I recognize this power. This comes from Orpheus. Pity there's so little. If there was a little more, I could work it into my natural chakra reserves. Then I could have a pool of draconic magic to use as I please. He sighed. Well, you win some and you lose some. And you, my foul devil friend, need to realize that all those creatures you helped the Chaos Brigade capture were brought to me, and every drop of power or magical energy was taken. I still hold the vast majority of it within me. So even if I couldn't absorb Orpheus's power, I could still win out against it. Now I really would prefer if you die. I'm tired of this supervillain monologue. Naruto's hands rose again, and the violet lightning cracked across the space separating them, tearing and ripping Diodora apart. As he screamed, smoke and steam drifted into the air above him, signaling his death. And as a last hurrah, Naruto turned his corpse to ash with a blast of concentrated light energy. Raynare watched in silence as the devil heir to the Astaroth family was reduced to dust, and his killer smiled at the murder he'd committed. Well, that was easy. And here I thought he might actually try to use his own magic. I guess he was just too weak without the help. He shrugged as if it was slightly disappointing, but not damaging. Anyway, we need to go before someone shows up. So much holy energy being thrown around will not go unnoticed. Besides, our absence at school will be noted soon. What? How? Why? Raynare shouted, only to find herself being pulled into a tight embrace. Then quite suddenly everything went black. Before she could so much as blink, she found herself standing with Naruto in the school equipment storage room. She looked around as Naruto sniffed appreciatively at her neck. He muttered something along the lines of, "I'll never get tired of this scent," and at last pulled away. "How are we feeling, R.H.on?" She spluttered. You killed a high devil in his own home. Are you insane? And you had me there? Someone is going to recognize what happened." "No, they won't." He smoothed a hand over her bare shoulder, comforting her. "Listen. Everything I do for a reason. It might not always be a good reason, or one you agree with, but I'll always have one." Naruto's head tilted to the side as if rethinking that statement. "Then again, I sometimes do things for no reason for a reason. So depending on how you look at it, everything I do could be considered perfectly random." He shook his head. "Anyway, the point is this. His death, and the way he died, serve several purposes that benefit the both of us." "What purposes?" "Explain." "Okay. First and foremost, for you, he was your client for the nun job. It was his actions which led to you coming here and becoming involved in recent events. He was the root cause of this entire situation, excluding my involvement." She nodded. "Now consider this from my perspective. I came here wanting to hide out, and not cause any big waves. The risk of being found out was too high if I made a commotion, and I can't reveal myself until I have some allies. Diodora's plan was to have you fall and kill a well-known nun, and the holder of a powerful sacred gear. How do you think that would be received in a devil-run town? Let me put it this way. It would cause a big wave. Especially with 2 heirs to prominent families living in the area, and my family would have immediately linked this to my recent disappearance because of my tendency to cause trouble. They would have come to investigate, and while I'm confident they couldn't find me, they would be too close for comfort." Naruto saw her nod in understanding again. He smiled and, using one finger that was suddenly tipped with a sharp claw, he cut the straps on her dress. It fell to the floor, leaving her almost naked. "Okay, furthermore, that bastard was a member of Chaos Brigade, a terrorist organization that seeks to restore the old Devil Kings to power and restart the endless war between the 3 factions. My killing him was a favor to the world, and besides, he was a scumbag who takes sick pleasure out of destroying innocent girls and turning them into mindless sex slaves. That isn't something I'm fond of doing, nor do I care for those who do it themselves. It's disgusting and only proves that you're too weak to demand respect as you are. Anyone who has to butcher another's mind to gain obedience doesn't deserve power in the first place." He frowned dangerously. "Which is why I hate my uncle and the rest of the assholes he calls Devil Kings." Naruto raised his arms and bit his thumb, drawing blood over the inside of his wrist. A second later there was a plume of smoke and a neatly folded stack of clothing appeared. Raynare recognized it as her school uniform. At his look she sighed and drew in her wings, shifting into her human form and completely masking her fallen powers. She felt the familiar tightness in her breasts and stomach and legs. "I hate this form," she whined. "On the contrary, it's very cute. I just want to bite you so bad right now. You should probably get dressed before I decide to sate my thirst again." Using that fallen lightning wasn't easy. She took the clothes from him and dressed as she asked, "So why did you want me to do that whole runaround thing with him?" "Oh, that the thing is that the death of a devil from an important house causes even bigger waves than a known sacred gear user disappearing. So I needed some way of framing someone else while not causing a faction war or a huge battle to break out over it. I told you to go in there dressed as a powerful fallen. Might I cast an illusion on you, by the way? It made it look like you had 6 wings instead of 2. Raynare's eyes widened. "That's why he looked so shocked when he first saw me, correct? And he assumed that you were a lot more powerful than he first thought. But that's beside the point. It wasn't really for his benefit. Really, it was about everyone else. They didn't see my sweet Raynare walking up to speak with Diodora. They saw a powerful and unknown fallen woman visiting a devil lord for some undisclosed reason, which I might add, will cast him in a very bad light." She accepted that as true. Pure-blood devils rarely associated with fallen unless they were killing them. As I said, this would reflect badly on him, so he would quickly try to make things more confined and private. So he took you deep into his home to his chambers, where I was able to kill him away from prying eyes. Plus I used all the fallen magic I've taken from drinking your blood and used lightning to fry him to death. This helps in several ways. First, it completely eliminates suspicion of you. As a single-tier fallen angel, you aren't powerful enough to kill a high devil with pure lightning. Second, it puts the blame on some random female high-rank fallen, of which there are very few. Naruto put his hands together, and as smoke enveloped him, leaving him wearing the school uniform as well. You can probably guess that most if not all of the high-ranked female fallen are going to have some proof of being elsewhere at the time. Thus everyone will assume that it was a rogue fallen with a grudge against the Astaroth house. This draws even more attention away from me and my involvement, because I had enough time to sneak past all of his defenses without leaving a trace or harming any guards. In effect, we have our perfect assassination with no possibility of being caught. Even if they did somehow suspect 2 high school students like us, we were in school the whole time. And Rias Gremory as well as Sona Citri would be able to attest to that. He pulled his fingers through his spiky blonde hair. So to cap it all off, I stay hidden, get a chance to save an innocent girl from a horrible fate, kill an evil bastard who badly needed axing, and I got 2 sexy costumes for my fallen angel girlfriend to wear. What do you mean it wasn't there? That's exactly what I said. I went back to dispose of the body and it was gone. There was just this big blood stain and nothing else. Like he got bored bleeding out and decided to head home. Warner and Middle looked at each other. Issei Hyoto's corpse was gone. The bastard boy with the sacred gear had disappeared after being stabbed 3 times, once through each lung and then in the heart. How he was supposed to do anything other than die? They had no idea. But he went somewhere and that meant they were in trouble. As of yet they hadn't revealed their location, but there were 2 strong peerages in town and either one could discover them with relative ease. That's why they'd been relying on Raynare to kill him. She'd been at this longer than anyone, besides Danasik, but he was a crazy bastard with no subtlety. Raynare had tact and didn't kill without being fairly sure that the opportune moment had arrived. The rest of them wouldn't have waited until that weekend to kill him. She herself was more of an eliminate threats as they appear kind of girl. Middle was impatient, which was more than sufficiently proven when she killed him days ahead of schedule. Or she thought she'd killed him, that misconception being part of the problem. So what do we do about this? It's obvious he can access his sacred gear, whatever it is. Otherwise he'd be a corpse. Danasik spoke from where he leaned against one wall of the church. I suppose it's possible that he was resurrected as a devil, but it seems highly unlikely that they would let him die as opposed to converting him as a living being. Warner and Middle nodded in understanding. The evil peace system, which devils used to resurrect another being as a devil, didn't need to be used on a dead person. In fact, it worked far better on the living. They would know since both fallen and pure angels also used their own versions of the system. That being said, both were far less effective than the devil's magic. For angels, they could only make an angel out of a living being, and even then they had to be pure of heart. Fallen could resurrect the dead with theirs, but there was always a chance that the corpse would absorb the peace and remain a corpse, a fallen corpse, but a corpse nonetheless. They might have been following him and saw me attack, Middle pondered. Then they could have come in and rescued him as I left in disgust. If there were more than one half could have saved his miserable life while the other followed me here. That's foolish. We'd all know if there were devils in the vicinity. This location is still secure for what it's worth. Danasik growled. We need to find out what happened to him. He was a possible threat. Now he's a gaping hole in our security, Middle agreed. Yep, so that means that we'll have to get close to him, but I can't do it. I'm the one who attacked him, and I'm out of the question. I'm too old and I don't have any skill with illusions. There is also the issue of my hatred of devils. I doubt I could restrain the urge to attack one of them in that school of theirs. Warner sighed. I get it, I'm the only option. She grumbled, pulling her fingers through her long blue hair in an agitated way. Still, I don't like the idea of getting close to that boy. From what Raynare said, he's a complete pervert. A throaty laugh came from Danasik. Oh. I forgot you're like the only female fallen I know whose great sin wasn't lust. Wasn't your sloth? She frowned and her shoulders dropped as she thought. No, it was envy, you ass. This is so troublesome. Don't complain. You volunteered for this mission, remember? Yeah, but only because Raynare was my friend. We both served under the same master for the last 50 years. She sighed again, wishing she could just escape from all this and get Raynare back. I'll infiltrate the school and find out what happened to her target. You two don't do anything reckless while I'm gone. Got it. You be careful now. After school ended, Naruto and Raynare returned to his apartment. Both of them were a bit on edge. Her because every devil in the school seemed to be missing from class, from the fiery redhead Rias to the now elusive Kiba. And in addition to that, the pervert was gone. Issei, her target, had disappeared and hadn't been seen all day. Naruto hadn't noticed since he was in the year above him. Raynare told him once they left home and Naruto went over the situation with her. He believed that Rias had made her move to claim the sacred gear user. Raynare agreed, but still didn't know why Naruto cared. Rias Gremry claiming a human in her own territory was hardly going to draw attention, but Naruto was still every bit as uneasy as her. Both of them entered the living room of his apartment, and Naruto disappeared in a plume of smoke. When it was gone, he was wearing black sweatpants and an orange t-shirt. He glanced back at her once before collapsing onto the single couch. She watched as he made a strange hand sign, her mouth opened to ask when a loud pop echoed in her ears and a low table appeared in front of the couch. Naruto put his feet up on it while he leaned back. His tense muscles relaxed visibly as he let out a long breath. You alright, Naruto? Yeah, but my instincts are telling me that something bad is happening, you know. And I'm seldom wrong when it comes to my urges. She nodded and began to disrobe. Naruto's eyes shifted toward her to watch as she stripped naked. She did her best to ignore his gaze, even though it did give her a rather nice ego boost. To have a young man who basically equaled a prince ogling her was pretty cool. Raynare moved to her room, read Naruto's room, and grabbed a more casual outfit. Naruto had mentioned that he had a slight schoolgirl fetish but admitted that his fetish for half-naked fallen angels was greater. Hey Ra-chan. I just thought of something. The next morning, Warner walked along the hallway following in the wake of a young human man. Supposedly he was the main homeroom teacher for the high school, and he was also one of the most unwary humans she'd even encountered. As it was, she'd always had a few problems with disguising her aura enough to stay completely hidden, but she was 10 times as skilled as Danasik when it came to stealth and infiltration. And of course Middle couldn't exactly get close to someone who'd she attempted to murder. Yet this man couldn't even sense her wrongness. She let out a sigh. A bit nervous, I take it? Well, don't worry. This year we've had several transfer students. They're all fitting in fine. I'm sure they'll welcome you in no time. Warner blinked at the man's reassurance. She didn't know why, and it was quite disturbing, but she actually felt a little better. Must be having a mental breakdown with Raynare gone. She grumbled something along the lines of, I'll believe it when I see it. A few minutes of walking later she was led into the third-year classroom that would be her homeroom. The instant she entered she felt the pull of several presences. While she was bad at disguising herself, she was talented at sensing others. And there were half a dozen devils just in this room. Her eyes marked each of them quickly and sent a shiver of fear up her spine. Both of the devil heirs were in this class. The beautiful Rias Gremory sat in the middle lead of the classroom, giving her an inquisitive look even as her eyes shifted to a blonde boy on the other side of the class. Close to her was Rias's queen, who Warner recognized as the one they'd been advised against approaching in any way. She didn't look that bad. Also in the room were Sona Citri and her queen, both of which were barely paying attention to her. They were focused inwards at the moment, probably thinking about the issue with the fallen in the area. Warner let out a sigh of relief. None of the devils seemed to notice her either. Must be the most inexperienced devils I've ever encountered. I guess all that time with Raynare helped. She glanced at the rest of the students, her gaze lingering on the blonde boy who held the Gremory's attention. She admitted to herself that he was handsome, with blonde hair and sapphire eyes, tan skin and a mischievous smile. He was looking at her directly at her. She shivered again, her unease coming back full force. She quickly averted her eyes and scanned the rest of the room. Beside her Irika started to introduce her to the class. She however had stopped dead, her jaw dropping and her eyes widening. She let her shock radiate out for a full 10 seconds before she gasped and shrieked. Raynare? Raynare shifted uncomfortable in her seat. Naruto was on the other side of the classroom, much to her displeasure. After last night she didn't have the willpower to keep her eyes off him. After all, how often does a discarded fallen angel get taken as the first mate of a devil/vampire prince? And after 6 hours of the best sex she'd ever dreamed of, she was still sore. It almost seemed too good to be true. She'd been confused about her place in the world before then. She wondered what her true role was. She was his servant, and prey to a certain extent. He'd obviously had some kind of attachment to her, but now she had no doubts about where her place was. Naruto explained most of it to her after he'd settled down. He decided that he would take her as his mate, as it turned out that required an explanation in and of itself. He told her that the heirs of Lucifer were chosen by the amount of true devil power they inherited. Publicly his uncle Raynare held the title of Lucifer's heir, but it was only because no others had bothered to take the title away. As it was now, anyone who took the title from Raynare would then be targeted by the other heirs. Everyone knew that his mother was the strongest heir, since there were few who actually knew he existed. The fact that he was a hybrid wouldn't go over well with most of them. The point, as he tried to make, was that he was the strongest heir and thus at any time could basically tell Raynare to scram. And if the old man didn't relinquish the throne, then the other heirs were obligated by blood to hunt him down and kill him. Raynare asked why he hadn't done it yet. She didn't expect the answer he gave. Naruto explained that the true Devil King was allowed 5 wives. And the rest were only allowed as concubines. As the newly recognized heir, he would almost certainly be bombarded with marriage proposals from all and sundry. He despised the idea of a forced marriage after being locked up in the family castle and forced to help in Raizave's schemes for so long. Basically, he had a very long bucket list of things he wanted to do before he took the throne for himself and was locked down. Primarily, he wanted to take his first 5 mates before any marriage could be forced on him, destroy the old Satan faction of the Chaos Brigade, and make an alliance with an old friend of his from the Norse mythos. He didn't mention who it was, but she had a sneaking suspicion. But all of that aside, she, a fallen angel, had been handpicked to be queen of the devils. On one hand, she wasn't exactly pleased that this would come with a huge host of responsibilities in the future, but Naruto was hers. She couldn't describe how amazing it felt to have him tell her that she would stay by his side forever. It might have helped that she had been coming down from a truly spectacular orgasm at the time. She snapped herself out of her personal thoughts long enough to become aware of the hot ache between her legs. She glanced back at Naruto only to see his gaze drawn away from her, and to Raynare's heart nearly stopped as she met the shocked gaze of none other than Warner. Raynare? Shit. She hurriedly looked to Naruto, who was still looking at her, but his expression was confused. Raynare realized that he was playing the dumb student. He glanced over at her, and she felt her throat burn ever so slightly. Naruto's emotions gradually leaked in through the mark he'd placed on her the night before. He was urging her to be calm. She could tell that much from the soothing sensation he instilled through the link. Hi, it's been a while. You forgot my name, huh? Warner blinked through her shock and apparently realized that she was making a serious scene now. And all the devils in the room were watching either her or Raynare. She dropped her head. Sorry, I forgot. She searched wildly, trying to remember the false name she'd been using. Yuma? You wanna talk after lunch? I'm sure there's a lot to catch up on. The older fallen looked at Raynare for a moment before collecting herself. Okay. Sure. That'll be great. Sona's eyes narrowed. She felt something off about the new girl just then. And that name Raynare. Had she heard it before? It did have a familiar ring to it that she couldn't place. But apparently it was also the wrong name or perhaps a nickname. All the same, it put her on edge. Even more on edge with the fact that Rias's target for her peerage had been attacked and killed by Fallen inside the town. That alone was quite enough to make her unhappy. Now the little things were just piling up. Sona didn't like it when things piled up. For instance, that was what? 6 transfer students this year when, in the last 3, there had only been 1. First there was the girl who transferred into the first year's class and had the strange pupilless eyes that freaked everyone out in class. Then there was her sibling, older by a few years but only a year above her, who had the same seemingly blind appearance. Follow that up with the yokai girl who transferred without warning even though all supernatural students were supposed to clear their identities with her first before coming to class. Then there was Naruto, who she suspected was a half-blood. No one just had fangs like he did, not to mention he never seemed very fond of human food. About the only time she ever seen him relish the taste of something was the apples which he seemed to produce from thin air at the oddest times. That in and of itself was weird enough, but the apples were always perfect and always that bright iridescent red. She didn't know why, but that sharp crunching sound always sent a little chill up her spine. Crunch! Sona jumped in her seat, turning her head to see Naruto leaning back in his chair with of course a large apple, now with a single bite missing. His blue eyes fell to the side in a lazy manner which only made his devious smirk seem more devilish. The very tips of his fangs poked out from his lip, giving him the classic, seductive vampire look which all the girls were prone to go crazy over. He met her eyes for a moment before looking back to the new transfer student. Sona shivered silently, and glanced back at the Yuma girl. She was another oddity. She'd shown up about 3 weeks ago, and enrolled in the school. She never got bad grades but never had any A's either. She was beautiful in the usual cute schoolgirl way with long black hair and light violet eyes. She also tended to seem a bit shy, more so recently. However, that wasn't what made her strange. It was the fact that Sona knew she wasn't normal. There was just something different about her which practically shouted scared gear. At first she'd been tempted to recruit her along with Saji, but after she discovered what sacred gear her pawn had, she'd all but forgotten the reclusive girl. Now though there was more evidence that something odd was going on, seeing how Yuma had seemingly skipped a grade between one day and the next. She used to be in the second-year classroom with Saji and Rias's new pawn, but now she was in the third-year class and it happened on the same day Rias's new pawn was attacked. Such a coincidence would have normally thrown her in the harsh light of suspicion, but Issei, Red, the pervert, had told them it was a little blonde Fallen who'd killed him, although he never used words like killed or murdered when in relation to himself. All the same, there were too many unknowns that she wasn't aware of. I'll have Tsubaki or maybe Saji follow them when they talk later. I have a feeling that whatever it is I'll want to know. Crunch! Damn, I hate apples. After the class ended it was time for science. However, there was a 15-minute break in between classes, and as soon as she left the classroom, Raynare found herself being pulled along by Calwarner. Her old friend ignored the other students as she half-guided, half-dragged her down the hallway and 2 flights of stairs. Once on the ground floor, Raynare realized she was being pulled outside. Hey! Where are we going? School supply building. I found it unlocked when I scouted the school earlier. Someone cleaned up the inside. It smelled a bit like blood inside, so I figured that there must be some stupid hazing ceremony for one of these human clubs. She sounded disgusted by the thought. Raynare's mind raced. She didn't know what to tell her old friend. Calwarner had been there on dozens of missions and assignments. They both had the same masters time and time again. And unlike most Fallen whose primary sins were different, Calwarner had always been nice to her, despite the fact that her sin was envy instead of lust. She gasped as she saw the storage shed that Calwarner was making a beeline for. It was the same place Naruto's had cleaned out and sealed so that normal humans didn't go near it, but supernatural being wouldn't notice anything was off. It was where he took her when he was thirsty between classes or he needed to talk to her about something. The door was wrenched open and Raynare was dragged inside. This was followed by a sliding bang as a small metal bar was drawn over the inside of the door. Then Calwarner turned to her, worry, anger, and fear in her eyes. Raynare, why? Why are you at this school? You were supposed to ask your target out on a date and kill him, not vanish into the ether. I was worried sick that the little shit activated his sacred gear somehow and killed you. Aya, she looked down, not feeling up to answering her friend. It's complicated, I guess. I guess? Explain, I guess, she sighed. It was the evening after school when I was going to make contact with the target the first time. I had it all planned out just like I said, but when I was just about to start, I was kidnapped. Calwarner's eyes bugged out. What? Raynare shushed her hurriedly. Keep it down. Do you have any idea how many devils there are in this school? And there's yokai as well. Plus you already made a scene in class. We don't need them hearing us. Especially since you went and failed to kill the target after all that. That's not important, Raynare. Tell me, if not as a teammate then as a friend. Why in the 7 heavens or all 9 hells did you go missing and not tell anyone? Kidnapping only goes so far even if I believed you. You aren't that kind of person. If you were really trapped then you would be making a scene yourself, not sitting meekly in a classroom with a bunch of devils. Doubt gnawed at Raynare as she considered whether she could tell her old friend about Naruto. Would he feel betrayed even after making her his mate? Would he be furious that she'd gone and compromised him? She just didn't know. It's okay. Go ahead. Raynare's eyes widened as the barest whisper found its way into her ear. She realized with amazement that Naruto was right next to her, leaning in close to answer her unasked question. Tell her what you want. Try to bring her into the fold if you can. I don't want to hurt a friend of yours, but there's a devil coming this way, probably to eavesdrop. I have to take care of her. But don't worry. You won't be hurt outside. She nodded as if to herself and felt the touch of lips on her cheek before the still invisible vampire stalked away. Raynare looked up to Calawarner and sighed loudly. She decided to be completely honest now that Naruto had given her the reassurance she needed. Can I be really blunt, Kara? Her friend nodded. That's all I expect from you, Ray. Ah fuck. This is still a bit hard for me to believe. It's just that, when I was about to ask that kid out to kill him, this guy came out of nowhere and subdued me before I could so much as try and escape. He took me back to his apartment. This will probably sound like a giant load of bull, but it turned out that he was a prince. He's a devil, sort of. Anyway, he just left home for the first time. Or more like he ran away from home and didn't want to be found again so quickly. When he realized we were about to do something that would draw a ton of attention to this place, he decided to stop it. Raynare took a long breath before continuing. It turned out that he knew a lot about us. I still don't know much about his upbringing or what kind of connections he has, but our leader, Kokobile, is actually working with a terrorist group called the Chaos Brigade, at least that's what Naruto calls it. Naruto? Raynare blushed scarlet and looked away. He's the prince I mentioned. He is, I mean. A widening of Calawarner's eyes and a loosening of the jaw showed that her friend understood. You fell for him, didn't you? Raynare couldn't look at her friend now. It wasn't that she was embarrassed for her feelings towards the blonde, even if she was, but she knew that Calawarner was judging her for it. Judging her for the fact that it was a devil, not just for failing the mission and leaving without a trace. Okay, I'm not going to get pissed and make a big mess of things, but shit. Did you have to do this to me? We've hung out through thick and thin and you go mushy on me like this. And with the devil. I don't understand how you could see anything in one of them, but he's kind and he's always making me feel good about myself. He doesn't care that I'm a fallen or even that I'm low-ranking, Calawarner growled. And how long has it been since you met him? A few days. That's how long. And barely even that if you're realistic. You might have fallen for him, but your primary sin is lust. It's easy for you to fall for someone. That's why you were only an angel until you hit puberty and then you were gone. A devil isn't going to actually care for a fallen, and for damn sure not a devil prince. You're wrong. What was that? Calawarner looked into Raynare's eyes, which had gone from embarrassed, to shocked and dismayed, to angry. I said you're wrong. Naruto's made me his mate. Even if he wanted to get rid of me later, he's bound to me. That stunned Calawarner into silence. A devil prince actually made a fallen his mate? Well, that explained a lot. The very term mate was special in supernatural society. Marriages could be cancelled. Divorces were uncommon, but they happened. However, mating was a permanent contract that all kinds of supernatural beings used in their own way, from fallen, to devils, to yokai and more. About the only races that didn't permanently mate were dragons and angels. Dragons, because they rarely found another one of their species who they got along with, and angels because it just didn't happen. 99.9% of angels who fell in love also fell in the literal sense. But her friend had a devil make her his mate? That just didn't happen. Devils and fallen didn't mate any more than devils and angels did. At least she'd never heard of it happening. Calawarner asked hesitantly, Are you sure? Yes. Naruto and we just did it last night. Her cheeks flushed red again, and her breathing hitched. He's not like normal devils, Kara. He's not afraid of crossing boundaries and making friends with anyone who's willing. He offered me a chance to stay with him as his servant at first, seeing how he wasn't going to let me finish my mission. And knowing how Kokobile is, you decided it's better to serve an unknown master than one you know for sure will kill you for failure. Calawarner finished her reasoning. I don't like to admit it, but you did the same as I would if I was a luster like you. Raynare glanced at her with a slight smirk as she realized her friend had her back after all. You would have anyway. Oh really? And tell me, was this mate of yours in class? She nodded, smiling now. It was back to old times already. Calawarner wasn't going to blame her for being what she was, especially under her circumstances. And who was this prince of yours? The blonde one with the apple. Raynare answered without missing a beat. Calawarner suddenly went pink herself. Oh god, I know he's dreamy even when he's in human form. That caused Calawarner to facepalm. Damn, I'm falling into the old fangirl routine. But shit. He was like the second person I noticed after the Gremory. Those eyes of his, are those an illusion? Sort of. Naruto's actually only part devil. He's also human and vampire at the same time. Those are his human eyes and he can bring them out anytime he wants. Then his vampire eyes are blood red with slit pupils. I'm not really sure what his devil eyes are like though. They shift around a lot. Calawarner sighed and let her shoulders slump. So I guess you're not coming back to join the group. Nope. I'm staying with Naruto. And he's going to prevent us from stirring up any more trouble, I suppose. You said he want to keep under the radar. Raynare scratched the back of her neck uneasily. I'm not going to lie to you. Naruto is far beyond our level. All of us put together wouldn't stand a chance against him with both hands tied behind his back. She smiled. But he told me to try and bring you into the fold, so to speak. I don't think you want to get executed by your boss any more than I did. And Naruto has the connections to keep you safe from Kokubile, and if he's as strong as I think he might be, he could very well be as strong as him. No way, I get that he's a prince and all, but taking out a fallen general? He killed a high devil without taking a single hit. And not a weak on either. The high devils at this school might be heirs, but they don't have any real training or power unless they team up. That one was using magic on par with dragons, at least that's what Naruto said. Warner appeared to think about it for a long moment before she asked, Middled? I think Naruto would be fine with helping her out too. But I get the feeling that Danasik is a big no as far as Naruto doing anything other than killing him. The moment he finds out about me, he'll try to hunt Naruto down and kill the both of us. Naruto would turn him into a big smear on the ground if he tried anything. Which he would, she agreed. Okay, this is gonna be awkward. Fine, have it your way. I can take a hint. Your prince or whatever sounds like the kind of guy who gets his way more often than not. She pinched the bridge of her nose. If we're going to do this, then I need to get Middle to meet you and him alone somewhere. And Danasik is dead weight. I take it Naruto will dispose of him, pretty much. God, this is screwing with my head. I swear if I ever find a peaceful place to settle down, I'm just going to lay around and watch the clouds. Just forget about everything else. Warner grimaced. Then I suppose for now we go back to class and act normal. Then I go and collect Middle. We can meet here early tomorrow morning and get her sorted out. Your boy can deal with Danasik after school, and then all we have to do is get the nun and tell her that she's out of the job. Raynare thought that sounded fine. I'll run it by Naruto after the next class, and then we can talk about it at lunch. We'll just have to sit together. He can figure out the rest. Fine with me. Anyway, we should probably go now. Right. Sitting with her hands tied behind her and her ankles secured to the floor with a strange strip of seemingly unbreakable paper, Tsubaki knew she was in trouble. It had been too fast to even cry out. One moment she was heading for the storage shed to listen in to the 2 transfer students, as Sona had directed, and the next she was waking up in a small abandoned room on the east side of the school. She figured it was abandoned because she hadn't even known it was there before, but she could feel that she was still within the school grounds. A big help that was, especially since she somehow was unable to draw upon even the slightest amount of devil power. Her wings, which her pinion behind her, couldn't even be hidden. That was how much her magic was restricted. This is an interesting situation I've gotten myself into. Question is, how do I get out of it? Deciding to speak before she was spoken to, she raised her voice to be heard, only to be stopped by the most ominous of noises. Crunch. So Tsubaki-chan, how's your day going? Tsubaki twisted around, her eyes locking onto deep blue orbs. Naruto. Yep, that's me. Or I am him, or we are each other. It really depends on who you're talking to or about. He scratched his head as if he was puzzled about it himself. She blinked. What gibberish are you speaking? And more importantly, why have you done this to me? Her voice wasn't panicked, or even unstable. It was just matter of fact. Naruto seemed amused by something in her questions because he smirked. Oh, that? It's actually the ancient traditional way of speaking for devils. To always answer questions in sets of 2 or 3. The first is a direct answer to an inquiry, while the second is either a direct contradiction of the first, or the same answer phrased differently. The third is generally added to increase confusion and completely throw the first and second answers into doubt. Naruto grinned and stalked around her so that she wasn't turning to look at him. His grin was predatory. It reminded her nothing so much as the one time she'd seen Seraph's childlike mask slip completely. That had been shortly after she first joined the peerage. Suffice to say there was a mountain range, or 2, missing after that. And now to see Naruto bearing a death grin that Asmodeus himself would have wept in pride for, well, she couldn't be blamed that her control slipped. Tsubaki cringed back from him, looking away hurriedly. Please don't kill me. I don't believe I've done anything to offend you, and you haven't, just to be clear. I feel a bit guilty for tying you up like this, but I needed to talk to you eventually anyway. For several reasons, actually. It's just happening a lot sooner than I anticipated. So I'm tied up because? He raised his eyebrow. You're tied up because it's easy for a devil to fake that reasonable and constantly bland expression. And besides, few devils I've ever known are as severe as you are usually. I figured that you were hiding your real personality from everyone but your peerage. I couldn't be sure that you were as reasonable as you seemed. He shrugged. And besides, the rest of Sona's peerage isn't any help in figuring it out. You're rather paranoid. I know, right? He chuckled darkly. You'll have to forgive me, but regardless of how you see yourselves, everyone, regardless of who they are, see things through tinted glasses. Some only wear lightly shaded ones, while others walk around with the insides painted black. I had an interesting upbringing. Half of the people who I saw told me that your peerage and the new devils were nothing but traitorous scum who needed to be taught their place. She frowned as he continued. The others said that their counterparts were fools and too stuck in their ways to see what was in front of them. And as much as I disliked the former and loved the later, I still had to find out for myself just who was right. I refused to be led blindly by anyone regardless of their intentions to protect me, harm me, or otherwise. Naruto looked down at her and said bluntly, I've let myself be used by others for too long to take a chance on you manipulating me in some way. I take it you were raised by one of the ancient devil families? Not everyone uses the term new devil as a bad thing. Tsubaki felt less threatened now and found herself respecting him for his reasoning and his firm grasp on the truth of life. Everyone was biased, and it was a good sign that he wasn't quick to accept the views of others even if they seemed more wholesome. At her question though, Naruto burst out laughing. You can say that again. Now I'm going to be honest with you. When I first came here it was to lay low after running away from home in a sense. And my first thought when I saw the peerages here was to seduce certain members to my side and cause mischief. However, certain events led me to decide that wasn't for the best. And with or without you knowing it, I'm already working to take care of one mess Rias's peerage is neck deep in, the Fallen. I guess you and Rias's peerage do communicate. I figured as much when both of your teams were gone on the same day. He seemed to think to himself for a moment. Oh, how's Issei by the way? I stopped one attempt on his life, but there were actually 4 Fallen in the area, so I suppose he was attacked. Seeing how he was gone on the same day, Tsubaki nodded. You're right. He was killed actually, but Rias was there in time to resurrect him without any ill side effects. Ah, that's good. I don't want any attention drawn to this town while I'm here. I'd like to stay off a leash as long as I can. Leash? Yeah. Naruto pointed to her and then to himself, while making his speech rough and brutish. You friend of new devil heir. Me heir of old devil family. He chuckled, allowing his voice to return to normal. I want to make friends here, but I also don't want you guys to report my location first thing you know. May I ask the real reason? Only if you give me something in return and do be honest. I can sense if you outright lie to me. She shrugged her shoulders slightly. Ask away. I'm in no position to stop you, okay? Will Sona report me to her sister even if she determines that I'm not a threat to her or this town? A slight chuckle of her own escaped Tsubaki. Well, Naruto-san. I can safely say that regardless of if she trusts you or not, Falsama is the last person she reports you to. She is deathly afraid of her older sister because of the mess she makes of everything in which she involves herself. Falsama is legendary for her eccentricities, shall we say. If she were to report you, which I believe is dependent on your specific circumstances, then it would be to Ajuka Beelzebub or Sizex Lucifer. You still didn't answer my question, Tsubaki-chan, although that was an expert attempt to evade. Anyone who didn't have to deal with my godfather would have been put off by that. He crouched down in front of her. What I'm really asking is if Sona is willing to do me a favor and keep quiet to her superiors about me for a while. In reality, it will actually be better for her if I stay hidden, since there will be some unsavory people looking for me. Well? She dropped her head. My king is bound by her word. I believe she would report you because it is part of her duty to do so. Well, that presents some problems for me. I might just have to. He trailed off and went silent, his face registering shock for a brief moment. Then his eyes snapped to hers. Your king is in danger. If you want to reach her in time, you'll have to take my help for now. Maybe I can get a promise out of her for helping then. What? What's going on? How can you tell? No time for that. He snapped his fingers and she felt the bonds holding her lose their magical enhancement. She quickly stood, snapping her restraints. Thank you, but how do? Naruto grabbed her arm. This will feel weird. Huh? Tsubaki felt a violent twisting sensation in her stomach and space bent around her. What is this? How is he planning on taking us to Sona? Sona stood isolated. She didn't know what was happening. One moment the shy second-year transfer student with the odd pale eyes had approached her, asking for help, and the next she was being attacked. But that wasn't what surprised her. There had been attempts on her life before. And kidnappings too. What shocked her was the skill and ease with which she was being defeated, and the worst part was that her opponent seemed almost sympathetic, wincing even as she landed another jab in Sona's solar plexus. I'm sorry, but these are my orders, Devil-san. I do not wish to cause harm, but it is required of me. Sona gritted her teeth and stood shakily, looking across at her opponent. She was the same age it seemed, with long dark blue hair framed in a Heim cut. She had the palest porcelain skin she'd ever seen and graceful features and movements that made her seem borderline angelic. If it wasn't for her hair color, she would have immediately thought she was an angel, but every angel she'd heard about had blonde hair. It doesn't matter, thought. She is using holy energy, and the way she keeps hitting me, I don't know how, but I can't use my magic like I normally would. It's as if she's disabling my ability to summon magic each time she strikes. Her gaze turned beyond the older sister to the younger. She had no hope of defeating these girls unless Rias's peerage came. They were too fast and too contained. None of their movements caused any collateral damage, and they were so precise the younger sister was 2 or 3 times as deadly as the elder, or at least she was far more fierce, seeing how she was single-handedly taking on the rest of her peerage and winning. In fact, only Momo and Saji were standing. Tomo and Rhea were unconscious, having been felled quickly and efficiently the moment they appeared on the scene. Sona prayed they hadn't been severely injured. That thought nearly killed her, 2 fingers shooting over her head as she ducked. Sona grimaced and somersaulted back. The girl followed, her fighting style like water, dangerous and tricky to avoid. She'd already found out that she had to keep out of melee range at all costs. It just wasn't quite as simple as that. Sona dodged another lightning-fast jab and flared her wings out wide. She jumped in the air, giving a quick flap and summoning her magic circle. Her gaze locked on the pale pupilless orbs and the bulging veins around them. Time to end this if I can. Without a word, water shot forth from her magic circle, spearing downward like a sharpened tentacle, only for the girl to use the palm of her hand to deflect it. How? A jagged pain shot through her shoulder, and she glanced back to see the grim cast of the younger girl's face as her fingers jabbed right into her pressure point. Sona's wings failed, and she fell. As she did so, she saw Saji was sprawled on the ground lying over top of Momo, whose was trying to push him up while coughing up blood. No. This isn't happening. This can't happen. Where did this come from? They were just normal students before. I know they were a bit strange as far as their attitudes and appearances, but I couldn't sense anything wrong with them. Sona craned her neck even as the two converged on her. Hinata! A shout came from her left, causing the older girl stop dead, almost like she'd run into an invisible brick wall. The younger sister had no such compunctions, only shooting a displeased look her way as she plummeted towards her target. Then a flash of yellow light filled her vision, and all of her pain from the dozen jabs vanished. Sona had closed her eyes briefly, expecting the next attack to connect with a vital spot. Her eyes opened, and she found herself held in strong arms, bridal style. She also found herself looking into the blue eyes of one Naruto Uzumaki. You should really be more careful next time. He smirked and put her down on her feet, before he turned his attention to the two sisters, both of whom stood together watching them, about 20 feet away. Seconds later Sona felt a hand on her shoulder, and turned in time to see a concerned Tsubaki, who looked quite ill. Good to see we made it in time, my king. Tsubaki, what happened? How? I'll explain later. For now let Naruto-san take care of this. I believe he is capable. Sona looked back to Naruto, but the blonde was staring across at the sisters. But it wasn't he who spoke first. The elder sister looked down as if greatly ashamed of herself. At the same moment the younger shouted at Naruto. What in God's name are you doing here, Naruto? You're supposed to be at your faction's headquarters right now. We weren't told you were allowed outside. That earned a glare from him. News flash, Hanabi-chan. I'm quite finished pandering to the whims of those old fools. Even if I agreed with their views I would still have left. I'm not some weapon or test subject. You should know exactly how I feel. We're nothing like you half-breed scum. Naruto tilted his head. What's wrong with you, Hanabi? I expected you to be surprised or even shocked, but why would you be angry at me? I thought you two liked me. Wasn't I the one who helped you two out when my uncle's goons were about to beat you to a pulp? And what's with this anyway? Why the hell are you two attacking devils in their own territory? They aren't breaking any rules, and I refuse to believe that your father is this stupid. You shut up about my father! Sona pushed forward, tired of not knowing what was happening. Naruto-san, what is going on here? He glanced out of the corner of his eyes, saying, These two are Hinata and Hanabi Huga, two angels I know from when I was younger. They are part of a village of sorts. It's complicated and I can't tell you all about it here, but suffice to say it's one of the few places where angels can have a family without falling. Naruto gestured to them. The Huga clan is comprised of about 50 angels who share genetic abilities and skills. Those eyes are the mark of their clan. Sona's jaw dropped. Angels? Hanabi glared at them menacingly. Yeah, we're angels. What's the big deal? I think what Sona-chan here is trying to get at is, why are two angels attacking neutral devils when there isn't a war going on? He frowned. And I'm especially curious since we both know that the angels never send teens out to fight. Unlike the devils and fallen, angels only allow mature fighters in their standing army. Why are you here? You're what, 13, 14? She didn't answer. However, beside her Hinata looked increasingly agitated, her cheeks a bright shade of pink. Hanabi turned to her, about to say something, and saw her flushed face. Oh, not this. Hinata's fingers were pressing together, as she turned away from her little sister. Sorry, I can't help it. She sent a strange pleading look Naruto's way as she mumbled, You know how I feel about him. That earned an enraged snarl from Hanabi, who turned on Naruto. This is all your fault. It's your fault that she's like this. That she's so weak. Father is going to be forced to brand her with the seal if she doesn't prove herself this time, and so you just have to show up and blow all her chances of being free. Hinata's eyes flicked to her sister for a moment, before turning to Naruto. Sorry, Naruto-kun. Across from them Naruto stiffened. His eyes narrowed as he worked through the situation in his head. Hinata's father has obviously gotten involved with the wrong people. Since they can't fall like regular angels, they can basically be manipulated by outside forces, and it could go pretty much unnoticed at first. Damn it, what do? I can't kill them. If I do that, judging by the state of Sona's peerage, their boss will know someone unexpected is here helping. It would be just my luck that they're mixed up with the Chaos Brigade, and then bang, I'll be found out quick as that. He looked them up and down, thinking about the odds. There's a chance I can get them on my side. They did almost hang off me when they visited that one time with Dad. I think Hinata has always had a crush on me, especially with what I can smell right now, and yet it would be the same thing if they stay willingly. Their superiors will assume that they were killed and come to the same conclusion. The problem is that as much as I want to, I can't let them go free. If I do, then they will tell about my presence here, and that is even worse. Damn, what do I do? I want to help Hinata, but Hanabi looks set against me for some reason. I have an idea, it's not a nice one, but it will have to do. Sorry, Hanabi. Sona twitched as Naruto seemed to snap out of his thoughts. Hey Sona-chan. I'll explain everything later. For right now, just stay out of my way. This'll be quick. He closed his eyes briefly and then they snapped open, their blue gone to show deep churning purple. Sorry about this, Hinata-chan. What? Before anyone could react, Naruto was gone in a flash of speed, crossing the 20 feet between them before Ada sister could register the tensing of his muscles. His strike, aimed for Hanabi's torso, stuck true. The power behind it launching her backwards and into a tree hard enough to crack it. She coughed up blood and looked down in shock where her uniform had been torn away, leaving a hole in the fabric. A huge bruise was already forming on her pale skin. The pain of what was likely have a dozen cracked ribs shot through her, making her vision go unfocused. She was too dazed even to move for several seconds. Then she heard the gasp and a short exclamation followed by a long drawn-out moan. It sent a shiver of dread down her spine. Her head turned slowly, the pain forgotten as she saw Naruto's true objective. Her eyes focused on her older sister, who was loosely clutched in Naruto's arms. Her knees were bent, and her arms were limp at her sides. His face was buried in the hollow of her slender neck, and he was gorging himself. Hanabi went pale. Hinata's complete submission to his act shocked her almost as much as the act itself. Could he even drink from a pure angel? Was it even possible for him to have holy energy inside him? And why would she just let him? A soft sigh followed by a rustle of clothing heralded the end to Naruto's meal as he let Hinata fall to the ground. She was out cold before she hit the grass. Naruto, on the other hand, looked like an African native who never tasted sugar after a dozen Milky Way bars and 2 Coca-Cola classics. The blood that graced his chin was wiped away by a finger, which he then licked provocatively. Even from here she could feel his power spike, and then he was walking towards her. She hurriedly tried to move, only to realize her nerves were traumatized. She couldn't move, and as she looked up again, Naruto was right there, his eyes glowing and the most unpleasant expression on his face. A combination between lust and hunger. Hanabi sucked in her breath and closed her eyes, ready for the feeling of fangs in her throat. No, I'm not planning on biting you if that's what you're thinking. Her eyes opened inches away from hers. Why? She asked brokenly. You bit sis. She wanted me to, and she did taste amazing. I'm not sure I could stop myself if I'd actually been in the mood right then. I've never had angel blood before, not the pure kind anyway. Hanabi paled further. What are you going to do to me? Her anger was gone, replaced by fear for herself and fear for her sister. Well, it's not what I'm going to do. It's what I might do. You see, I don't want to be found here by my family or anyone associated with them, or even anyone who might lead to me being found out. However, you two present me with a problem. If I kill you, then suspicion will fall on this town's devils and on me, seeing how none of them are actually strong enough to defeat you. If I let you live, then you'll tell on me. If I let you stay, same thing. He cocked his head to the side. However, if you return home and tell your family that Hinata was killed because she slipped up against an unexpected move on Sona's part, then my presence is less of an issue. They might believe that she was taken down, but you're the prodigy who never loses. So here is what we will do. Naruto's eyes returned to their usual blue. I will take your sister. You will return to your home. You tell them she was defeated and then you were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Not a hard story to believe. Naruto smiled dangerously. As long as no one comes sniffing around, then you'll get off easy and I won't get found out. Hinata will be perfectly safe. He leaned in. That's what I like to call an offer you can't refuse. You know why? Because you can't? He sighed. Don't worry about Hinata. I won't kill her as long as you keep to your side of the deal. You wouldn't? You mean I wouldn't bite into that silky smooth skin and into her warm flesh? Are you implying that I wouldn't hold her tight and drink every last drop of her delicious blood till her life fled from her? I think you overestimate my restraint. His voice dropped to a low purr while one hand touched the bruised skin of her stomach. I'll give you enough power to get away from here, but not enough to heal you. I'm sure that's understandable. With that, Hanabi jerked. Heat was radiating from where his palm pressed against her bare skin. Holy energy mixed with something else was flowing into her, healing her injuries quickly. She bit back a whimper as the warm feeling flowed down her limbs, restoring control over her nervous system. Then Naruto pulled away. Just as he'd said, he left the majority of her injuries unhealed. You should go now. We don't need this getting any more complicated than it already is. Hanabi's eyebrows drew together in a solid line as her gaze shifted to her sister. Naruto interrupted her thoughts jarringly. You can't beat me to her. I could kill every student in this school and still have the time to spare to stop you. She froze. Leave now. I won't tell you again. His tone was cool, a deep glacial ice now. Hanabi shivered at the similarity to her father. Looking to her older sister again, she wished once for her safety, and allowed her wings to unfurl behind her. Her pale gray eyes met Naruto's once more as she shot skyward and then headed east. Naruto, along with Sona and Tsubaki, watched her go. the latter two still somewhat confused about the situation. It seemed as though Naruto used the younger's love of her sister to his advantage, and likewise took advantage of the elder's apparent feelings for him to make it work. But the question was, how did he know to do that? And how did he even know two angels at all? Sona turned her eyes to the blonde just as he turned to walk over to Hinata's unconscious body. He quickly knelt down and gently picked her up, cradling her against his chest. Then he approached them. Sona stepped back slightly as he stopped a few feet from her. You have a lot of explanations to give, Naruto-san. I guess so, but I also have something I want from you in return. About 20 minutes later, Sona sat in the student council room, since cleaned up, with Tsubaki and Saji, who'd woken shortly after they moved. All three devils were looking at him with a range of expressions. Tsubaki was extremely wary while Saji looked spooked, but then again, nearly getting killed by an undercover angel years younger than you might do that. It probably didn't help that Hanabi's magic still hadn't worn off. Sona, on the other hand, radiated a fierce curiosity now. Her eyes were fixed on his with an intensity that he admired. So Naruto-san, I've gone against my duties to report anything strange that happens here in favor of hearing an excellent explanation about recent events. You're free to start any time. Naruto leaned back on the small couch that was off to one side of the room. Hinata was still unconscious, as was the rest of Sona's peerage. He'd only been half lying when he told Hanabi not to overestimate his restraint. As he'd found out, tasting new blood was almost like a trigger for him. He nearly killed Hinata when all he'd intended to do was scare Hanabi. Angels didn't have the same survival mechanisms as fallen, and the Huga clan was especially fragile even compared to how angels usually were. Their attacks were deadly, but if you could get a good hit and they would toast. Sighing, Naruto glanced around the room. I'll tell you a couple things that are just general important info. Then you can ask which subject you want clarification on. Honestly, I intend to tell you guys everything eventually, but most of the basic facts need an additional explanation on their own. First off, and I'm a bit surprised you didn't notice this, Sona-chan, when you heard my name, but my last name, Uzumaki, is the human name given to the original house of Lucifer. I figured with your reputation for intelligence, and your history as a bookworm that you'd notice. Second, my other name, Namikaze, that's a family closely linked to the house of Vosk. Vosk? Sona and Tsubaki looked at each other before the latter looked back to him. You mean the house of Vosk? The vampire house that is supposed to be a branch family that serves the Valdi house, but could actually destroy them with ease because they made a pact with the Ouroboros dragon, the infinite dragon god. Naruto blinked, scratching his head. Oh well, you knew more than I thought you did. I figured you'd know the house, but I doubted you knew any of our history, especially not that bit. He chuckled, but the deal with Orpheus was like 6,000 years ago. The terms of the contract ended before my parents were born. The Vosk family is stronger for it, sure, but the branch family has always been stronger. Sona nodded. I've studied what's available on vampire history. At least to us devils. Your race is still scarce as it used to be in the Middle Ages. True enough, but you don't seem half as surprised about the fact that I'm related to Lucifer, the original one, that is. Naruto raised his eyebrow. Don't tell me you suspected. No, she paused, but for some reason it doesn't surprise me. The original Lucifer had 5 wives and rumor has it, 13 concubines. Each of them bore multiple children. It's been thousands of years since then. If you think about it, most of the major houses probably have a small amount of Lucifer blood in them. Sona frowned. Why do I get the impression that you are a bit closer than you imply merely using the name? Naruto smirked. You haven't guessed yet? I'm hurt. He sat forward, letting his eyes change to a violent swirling purple as he summoned his devil magic. I'm not just a part of the family, I'm the heir. Whether it was the way he said it, or the ridiculous nature of the statement, Sona didn't seem to realize what he'd said immediately. In fact, it was well over 2 minutes before her brain caught up with her ears and her pale skin became like paper. Why, you're joking. That would be a no. I am Naruto, son of Kushina Uzumaki, descendant of Lucifer. The thing is that the heirs of Lucifer aren't chosen through direct blood. It's judged by power instead. I'm the strongest of the heirs despite being part vampire and human. Of course, most aren't aware I exist. I've lived my entire life in the Lucifer family castle. You might say I decided I was tired of doing what was expected of me. He gestured to her. The complete opposite of you who are performing extra duties for your house's benefit. Naruto smirked. Now that's out of the way, I can get down to some of the more important business. You probably want to know about why I chose this place. The answer to that is simple. I thought that a town that was owned by devils and had 2 high devil heirs living inside would be easier to maneuver around. Plus, I didn't think anyone would have the balls to screw with the little sister of the current new Lucifer. His smirk widened as Sona frowned. Or the sister to the notorious Seraphal Leviathan. I was also intending on seducing some of you at his. An imaginary light bulb went off in his head. Actually, scratch that one. I am still planning on doing that. He put on a pout. I hope you don't tell Rias or her peerage about that part, it would ruin my fun. Naruto sniffed comically before resuming his previous attitude with a grin. But you guys probably realize my gambit to settle here for a while in a peaceful area has already been shot to hell by circumstances beyond my control. The fallen were one thing I certainly wasn't counting on, although if you'll let me, I do have a solution for that problem. Sona shared a glance with her queen before asking, what do you mean by solution? Are you suggesting that we let you go in and destroy them? That doesn't sound like a good idea? You're right. It isn't. And besides that, you don't know where they are, do you? The fact is that I've already taken one of the fallen who goes by the name of Yuma Amano in school for my own. Her real name is Raynare, and she's quite nice, he sighed dreamily. Very tasty too. The three devils across from him shifted uneasily, looking between each other, and wondering if it was really safe to be near him. Naruto snapped himself out of his momentary daydream. My point is that she can get a hold of her fellow fallen, and through her I will find out who is viable to join my/our side. Those that resist I'll dispose of in a quick and silent manner. I might have enough power to level this town with a sneeze, but I'm very discreet when I want to be. So? What do you say, Sona-chan? Well, first, she stated blandly, I think you can drop the chan. We don't know each other well enough for you to address me with such familiarity. Second, I'm not sure I trust you enough to let you handle this. You may have helped me previously, however that doesn't eliminate you from suspicion. I'm hurt, Sona-chan, but I understand that you probably aren't the trusting type. He raised his hands and tucked them behind his head. It doesn't really matter. If you don't want me to handle the fallen for you, I'll simply do it for myself. And you won't get a say in how it's done. You're a bit arrogant, don't you think? Naruto's eyes widened. Arrogant? Me? I think you're mistaken. You see, arrogant bastards are those who talk the talk and then get their asses handed to them the moment they get in a fight. What I have is called confidence, and I have every ounce of raw power and cunning I need to back it up. Don't doubt me, Sona Citri. The room seemed to contract quite suddenly for the devil girl. Naruto's eyes became all she could see, the purple changing to red slits, the pupils seeming to pulse with her own heartbeat. Sona struggled to breathe as she saw herself die in those eyes. Die 1,000 different ways, each harsher and more agonizing than the last. She gazed into the twin pools of eternity so long that she thought he had cast an illusion over her. And all the while she was falling into a deep abyss in which only endless torture and death remained. Sona dropped to her hands and knees, gasping for breath as Naruto blinked, his eyes bleeding back to purple. Saji was by her instantly, helping her up. She looked back to Naruto. He was sitting there, relaxed as can be. He looked almost bored, and she realized right there and then that he was far too strong to force into doing anything. If she told him, commanded him to do anything and he did it, it would be because he was humoring her. Not because he had any need or inclination to do it. Maybe when she came into the full breadth of her power she might be able to rival him, but that was hundreds if not thousands of years away, and he was this strong now. She was a mere kitten in comparison. What exactly does he want with us here? Someone as powerful as he is doesn't just do something because he likes the idea of it. He must have some plan. Sona stood with Saji's help, wishing there was something she could say or do to give her at least a small amount of leverage against him, but she was grasping at straws. What do you want, Naruto-san? What is your real goal? My true desire, huh? He sighed. That's hard to pin down. There are a lot of things I want. Not really much that I really need, but I suppose if I were to speak plainly, my goal is to have fun. Naruto saw their disbelieving looks and chuckled. Oh, don't be so surprised. I'm an immortal. Unlike you devils who will live for close to an eternity unless I'm killed, I will live forever. That's one of the perks of being a vampire. But there isn't any point in living so long if you don't enjoy it. God may have created us, but unlike the humans, I'm not so deluded as to think he gave us a purpose. Naruto smiled grimly. There is no meaning to life. It is our choice to decide what we want and how far we're willing to go to achieve it. I believe there's a biological imperative to mate and have children, but that's only to preserve our race. It isn't a purpose in any way, shape, or form. The pursuit of power isn't a purpose either, as power is only a means to an end. Those who grasp for power above all else will always feel dissatisfied. Since I know better than anyone, no matter how powerful you are, there is always something that can kick your ass. And peace isn't a worthy purpose either, however noble the ideal might be. Everyone, regardless of similarity, is different from one another. There will always be conflict since that's the nature of life. So what is left? Enjoy yourself. Take pleasure from the little things, the big things. Anything you can. He glanced at Hinata's still sleeping form. However, you shouldn't destroy another's chances of living a happy life just to enjoy your own. Sona stared at him for a few moments, not speaking, but digesting what he'd said. It seemed as though she was conflicted about something. He guessed she was unsure of what to ask now. After all, he'd basically told her that he was living to have a good time. It probably wasn't every day you heard an immortal claim that their purpose in life was to enjoy things to the fullest. Usually it was either the pursuit of power or prestige, and if it wasn't a negative goal, it was something impossible to achieve like true peace. So fun? That is what you want from life? Nothing else? No change you want to make to the world? Not even some minor one? Well, Naruto rolled his eyes. I told you my main goal in life is to enjoy myself, because if you aren't, then there isn't any point in living. I have no intention of being miserable or unhappy for the rest of eternity, thank you very much. But that doesn't mean I don't have things I want to change. Hell no, there's tons of stuff I think needs rearranged, but I won't put myself in a position where I forfeit my happiness to change some aspect of devil society, or whatnot. Naruto's hand flicked out, a small plume of white smoke seeming to come from his hand. A second later it dispersed, leaving a large apple resting on his palm. He curled his fingers slowly and smiled as his claws pierced the fruit. Naruto brought it to his lips and took a bite. One of the things I want to do is remove a certain organization from existence. But before I can do that I need a few things. One of them is allies who I can trust. I came here to this place for a few reasons. The first of them was you, Sona and Rias Gremory, of course. Your siblings, Seraphal and Serzex, are the arch-enemies of that organization. I was planning on getting your help after the dust had settled from my departure, however it seems to me that the dust just keeps getting stirred up, so I've decided to move my plans ahead a bit. Which is why you're talking to us right now, correct? Naruto nodded. Now, seeing how this all started during a break between classes and it's been longer than 15 minutes, so it seems to me that I should explain my involvement in your fallen problem before we head to lunch. Sona frowned. I have other questions as well, and I have answers to all, but if I don't feel like giving them then you're out of luck. Fair enough, Sona sighed. Tell me about our fallen problem then. Raynare sat with Kalawarner at an empty lunch table chatting, both of them nervous. She hadn't seen Naruto or any members of Sona's peerage yet. It made her uneasy, thinking that he must have been pulling the same trick with them as he'd done with her. She didn't think that would work, at least not on Sona or her queen. The Citri heir had quite a reputation as being smart as a whip. She jumped slightly as a hot sensation traced around her neck for a brief moment. She looked around quickly, only to jump again as Naruto sat down next to her without making even the slightest sound. He cast a look past her to Kalawarner, who waved back hesitantly. He gave her a broad wink before turning his attention back to his mate. "R-chan, you miss me?" She nodded. "Did your Yeah, it's been taken care of. Sona's peerage knows about the both of you now, and to some extent how you're involved with me. They also know why I'm here and what a few of my plans are. Not most of them, of course, but I haven't had the time to tell you everything either." He shifted closer to her on the table, slipping an arm around her waist and pulling her into a kiss. Slightly surprised, Raynare still didn't hesitate, returning it for long enough to make several of the nearby male students jealous. She noticed their hostile looks and promptly flipped them off. Who were they to think badly of her? If they saw her in her true form, they'd be unconscious from blood loss. She was Naruto's, not theirs. Naruto pulled away a moment later, reluctantly and wishing he could simply bite her. His thirst had returned again, and his throat was dry. He leaned in, whispering in her ear, "Before we get back to class, I'd like a bit more than a kiss." "I would like that." She leaned into him. "So my friend here is on board with us, but there are still the other two, Middlet and Donasek, who need to be found. We can get Middlet, I'm sure, but Donasek would never even listen to what a devil had to say. He's more than a little unhinged, even though he pretends to be a gentleman." He nodded. "Okay. Take care of him. Do you think he'll be at the abandoned church? Or should I go searching the town?" Kalawarner scooted closer so that she didn't risk being overheard by students at other tables. Middlet was going to be out on the look for any chance to kill the target, while Donasek held down the fort. "He'll almost certainly be there, unless he gets bored and does something stupid." Define stupid, she frowned. Like going out to hunt devils and justifying it by saying he was only looking for strays. He's done it before on other missions. It's why most people who know him consider him to be a major screw-up. Anytime he gets bored he throws caution, and usually the mission, to the wind. Sounds like I need to pay him a visit real soon then. Can't have him getting bored and drawing even more attention, damn. Naruto looked away. I need to get Hinata out of the spotlight. Her kind are way too easy to spot. I'll have to cash in a few favors to hide her. Who's Hinata? Raynare and Kalawarner looked puzzled. Of course. I forgot you wouldn't know. Right when both of you were talking, two angels attacked Sona and her peerage outside the main building. I showed up and forced one of them to leave by taking the other hostage. Their names are Hinata and Hanabi, sisters. They are rather special as angels go. You see, there's this little problem where no more angels can be created by God. So to solve the problem, a village was created where a few select angels would live. The angels born after couldn't fall and therefore could have families. This has prevented the angels from going extinct since the last Great War. Kalawarner's eyes widened. How do you know about that? Her tone was flat and disbelieving. How could you possibly know about Konoha? Naruto blinked. Wait, don't tell me you know about it too. I'm from that village, she frowned. Or at least the rest of my family is. I wasn't born in the village, so I wasn't granted the blessing of eternal purity. And what clan were you from? Nara. She sighed. And you didn't tell me how you knew. I'd like to know how a devil vampire prince knows about the best kept secret in heaven. He raised an eyebrow suggestively, ignoring her question. So are you as lazy as the rest of the clan? What's your primary sin? She didn't answer, only giving him her own raised eyebrow demanding an answer. Okay, so I guess it isn't sloth. Anyway, the reason I know is none of your business. I wouldn't even tell R-chan if she wasn't my mate. He caught the look that Kalawarner shot Raynare. And I haven't told her yet, so don't bother playing the friend card. Suffice to say, my father had dealings with the previous leader of the village, and he introduced me to some of the Huga clan when I was little. The Huga clan, but they're like the strongest clan in the village. A single mid-level Huga can take on 6 equivalent level devils in hand-to-hand combat. Calawarner seemed to stiffen. And oh shit. You said the angels' names were Hinata and Hanabi. I don't know that second one, but Hinata is the heir to the whole clan. Her voice, which had been slowly rising in volume, was cut off by Raynare pinching her hard under the table. Calawarner yelped and scooted away, but she still hissed under her breath. How are you going to? Don't worry about Hinata, Naruto said bluntly. I will take care of her. The only issue right now is getting her to a location where she can't be found by her family. I already made plans to do that tomorrow, and it will take up most of the day. I'll expect you to keep quiet here in school and not cause problems while I'm taking care of business. He glanced at Raynare. R.A.-chan will be coming with me. As my new mate, it would be best if we aren't separated for a while. Naruto turned back as they saw Sona entering the cafeteria with Tsubaki. For now, just be aware that Sona and her peerage are pseudo-allies. They will undoubtedly be keeping a close eye on you, especially while I'm gone tomorrow. Raynare nudged him gently. Naruto, where will we be going then, and shouldn't we be taking care of Middlet and Donasek? No. Unfortunately, this takes precedence, although I'll leave some protection behind just in case. As for where we will be going? That's a secret. I'd rather show you. Anyway, as soon as I get back I'll eliminate this Donasek and, if I need to, help convince Middlet to join us. Naruto stopped talking as Sona and Tsubaki sat down with their lunches. Both of them looked between the fallen, their expression unreadable. A tense silence settled over the 5 supernatural beings as the devils stared at the fallen. Eventually it was too much and Calawarner snapped. What? Sona nodded. I thought so. You don't pose a threat. I was simply making sure. Calawarner looked peeved but didn't comment. Sona turned her gaze to Naruto and Raynare, whose arm hand crept around him. Their eyes, both dark violet, met. Raynare, Sona, so Naruto-san is your mate? Raynare smiled at that. Yes, he is my mate now. Do you have a problem with that devil? Not necessarily. I'm only curious about how you feel about it. Naruto-san tells me you're happy with the arrangement, but I have a difficult time believing that a devil and a fallen can have such a relationship. His choosing you as a mate is also something of a personal and public issue. Sona frowned. I'll be blunt. I don't trust your kind. Whether that is because we are natural enemies or I have been raised to feel this way is irrelevant. What matters is that I don't know if I can trust you. Really? Raynare scowled. Let me put it this way. If Naruto takes his throne as he's told me he will, I'll be your queen. I personally don't trust devils all that much either, however Naruto-kun, in changing my opinion of your people. My point being that I will choose his side over any other. If you take action against me I could care less. You already told me you don't like me, but if you do anything to harm Naruto-kun or cause his plans to stall, she glared holes in Sona with her suddenly hatched gaze. I will take serious offense. Tsubaki snorted. You think you stand a chance against the heir to the Citri house? Naruto chuckled at their exchange, earning a wary look from the two devils. He smirked and leaned to the side, kissing Raynare's cheek affectionately. What he said next rocked them back a bit. You should be careful, Sona. I have enough power to destroy this school without so much as moving from this spot or speaking a single incantation. And as long as we're close together, R.A.-chan can draw on my power, and I can amplify hers. Of course, I haven't taught her how to do any of that yet, but I intend on making her as strong as she can be. You may be able to kill her with ease. At the moment his eyes hardened. However, that won't be the case for long. Naruto felt Raynare shift slightly, her eyes moving from Sona's to his. Her cheeks were a bit pink, and her feelings shifted across their link briefly. He allowed his own to reach Raynare as he leaned in close once more. I hope you don't mind doing some training tomorrow as well. She shook her head quickly as they at last started to eat. Kushina Uzumaki let out a sigh of defeat. In one hand she held a report from her servant that she'd sent out to find her son. It was quite a bit sooner to arrive than she thought, but for good reason. Dear Kushina-sama, I've had some difficulty finding any trace of your son, Naruto-sama, but I did discover a trace of your husband's teleportation magic near Terate Town in the lands owned by the Astaroth House. However, due to the knowledge that your husband is currently on an important mission elsewhere, I have come to the conclusion that your son is or was in the area. Furthermore, I have it on good authority that the Astaroth heir is dead. For some reason the family is trying to keep it a secret, but their servants do not serve well as mutes. The word on the street says that he was killed by a high-level fallen angel woman who visited him not 4 hours prior to my arrival. In addition to this, it seems that your cousin is not informing you of important events. The heir to the House of Gremory is apparently engaged to the second eldest son from the House of Phoenix, named Riser. In addition to this, I heard a rumor that this is not a desired outcome for the young heiress. I would advise you to attend this marriage ceremony as it might help your relations to Sir's Lucifer. Lastly, I would offer the suggestion that you send your husband's perverted acquaintance to search for Naruto-sama, as his skill in tracking are second to none. Respectfully, your servant Uego. Kushina grimaced as she reread the letter. This really was a problem. So her dear cousin thought he could keep her in the dark? How brave of him, but he really should have learned his lesson by now. It was about time she took some matters back into her own hands. She lifted her other hand in which held the second letter, the borders running with golden script. She allowed her eyes to trace over the words again while a small smile lit the corners of her lips. Kushina-chan, I hope this finds you quickly, as it wasn't easy for me to convince someone to deliver it. I've been working here for about a month now, but made no progress with the old man. He's as stubborn as ever and hates being interrupted more than you hate perverts. Sigh. However, I did find some rather interesting things here that I may bring back with me on my next time home. On another note, I've met someone very interesting here. I never would have thought to meet a member of the Nine here. He reminds me so much of our old acquaintance that I nearly embarrassed myself in front of Makuba. Anyway, my messenger is becoming impatient, and I must be on my way. Make sure to tell Naruto I love him, and try to smuggle him out of the castle. That boy needs a girl before your idiotic cousin tries to arrange another marriage. With love, Minato. Yet another sigh escaped Kushina as she finished reading her husband's letter. I wonder what Minato would say if he knew Naruto had left the castle only days before his letter arrived. He'd probably take the opportunity to show him the sights. I always was trying to keep Naruto from seeing. Kushina rubbed her temples and thought, maybe I should go to this wedding and speak to Surzex. That would be a double opportunity. Perhaps I can have this wedding cancelled. I know Naruto hates arranged marriages, but if only there was a way to make it work. Calawarner looked around the large apartment that Naruto was currently living in with Raynare. It felt strange to be there, probably because I'm being completely ignored. Calawarner never really understood the meaning of the saying feeling like a fifth wheel until now. As it was, she was sitting on a long couch with her feet up on a low coffee table, listening to the low moan coming from the bedroom. She grumbled to herself as she sat there. It was crazy how little Naruto and Raynare paid attention to her. It was like, here we are, make yourself at home, there's food in the kitchen so help yourself now, if you don't mind we'll be fucking in the other room. See ya. Calawarner wished that if she absolutely had to listen to the two of them doing it, she could have at least been allowed to join in. This wasn't going to happen though. When she mentioned the fact that devils of the Lucifer line typically had upwards of 3 wives, Raynare had made one thing perfectly clear. While she was perfectly willing to share Naruto with other women, admittedly not happy about it, she would have her alone time with him before she was forced to do so. So put another way, she refused to let her friend have a piece of the devil prince until she'd had her fill a number of times. I guess that's fair. But damn, it's making me horny just sitting here while it happens. Then again a thought popped into her head. Calawarner rummaged through the small dimensional pouch she carried with her, swiftly pulling out a little red book. A wicked little grin appeared on her face as she swiftly opened the book to a well-marked page and began reading. One thought crossed her mind as she slipped one hand down under her skirt. Ika with Diodora, standing in a huge cathedral-like room, a tall blue-eyed woman of intimidating stature stood, looking annoyed. Her long wavy blonde was curled around one finger endlessly as she watched 2 servants. The 2 squat blonde men were busy picking and pulling threads out of a large family tapestry. The massive piece of fabric was nearly 30 feet long and 10 feet high, spanning one section of the western wall. Originally it had depicted her with her husband and their 2 daughters, however it had been reworked recently, as in the 5 minutes it took her to use the restroom, and now, all 4 figures displayed were now shown stark naked and she'd been depicted wearing expensive lingerie. That little shit has guts. Not only does he put me wearing that, but he has me wearing a cheesy human brand. I'll break his legs if I catch him alone. A small frown forced her eyebrows to meet in a gold V. This was getting to be too much. Every single day, every 10 minutes something went wrong and it was starting to get on her nerves. Like very on her nerves. If she didn't find something to blast into oblivion she would go crazy. She was still watching the servants unpick the alterations 30 minutes later when her husband returned from his meeting with their king. Freya turned to him, her lips twisting into a smile. Did Odin say he could restore your beard, dear? A solemn shake of the head, and a lively twitch of his violently pink beard told her that it wasn't possible. Her husband's soft grimace turned into an aggrieved expression she knew well. After all, they were Loki's favorite targets, mainly because they'd already lost the privilege to go after him. Seeing how Loki could come and go from Asgard as he pleased, it was less than easy to catch the little cretin. She was forbidden from leaving after an incident with Azazel, the Fallen's current leader. And her husband was restricted to the usual means for leaving. Loki could be in the underworld before he managed to convince Tyr to let them out. That brat is going to pay next time I lay hands on him, he grumbled. I swear it was bad enough with him rearranging the furniture in the house in the middle of the night. But this? Permanently coloring my beard pink and then dipping it into a cup filled with Styx water? Now my beard is indestructible and even I can't shave it off. I'll have to wait 200 years for it to grow out. He cast his blue eyes downward, sulking. It's alright. I'll hex him with something nasty next time the court dines together. He nodded. That would be excellent. You're the only one who can fool Odin into letting you sit next to him. I just hope he doesn't bring that damned mutt next time. The thing's begging was nearly intolerable. Freya just sighed and went back to watching her servants toil. It really was a shame she could do something more permanent to Loki, but he was the god of tricksters. Fooling or pranking him to any great extent was nearly impossible. She pulled a hand through her hair again. If he does too much more this week I'll start getting gray hair. I'm a goddess for Odin's sake. A while later Raynare was lying in Naruto's bed, still breathing hard. She brushed the hair out of her eyes as she rested her head on one arm, watching him. Their second time hadn't lasted nearly as long, but it was still almost beyond belief how amazing he was in bed. Hell, she couldn't remember much of the last 20 minutes except that she really wanted to do whatever it was, again. She sighed as Naruto pulled out a long stylus and a sheet of parchment. She didn't know what he was doing, but it had something to do with what he had planned tomorrow, which, she believed, would include a visit to one of the outer mythos. After all, there were few enough places where you could hide in a world where the dominant religion was Christianity, and the angels were looking for you. Some of those places were under the control of the major mythos. The Norse gods controlled one such area, as did the Egyptian gods, and then there were the Japanese gods, though their power had waned since the last Great War. Any of these mythos could hide from the devils, angels, or fallen with ease. Such was the reason why they still existed. If they didn't have a few trump cards, they'd have been dismantled or destroyed centuries ago. For instance, the Egyptian gods in particular had it out for the fallen. Then again, if she thought about it, so did the Norse. What you thinking about her, Hon? Raynare shrugged and crawled over the bed to lie next to him. Not much. I was wondering where we're going tomorrow, I guess. Well, there's a favor that I'll be calling in tomorrow, and with any luck I can meet an old friend. Anyway, it will allow Hinata to stay hidden until I decide it's time to come out into the open. I'm not sure when I'll do that though, but if the world keeps forcing my hand, it'll be sooner rather than later. She nodded and watched as he cut open his wrist with the tip of the stylus, quickly dipping it in his blood. A thought popped into her head as she watched him there. Naruto-kun, you didn't tell Calawarner about how you knew those two angels or about her home village. Would you tell me about it? He turned his head slightly. Sure, it's mostly my dad's fault. Or I suppose I shouldn't call it a fault. It's just that he's the reason I know anything about angels. Sometime before I was born and a long time before he met my mother, he made friends with the old leader of Konoha, which is the pure village. All the angels born within the walls of the village are eternally pure, as they call it. Anyway, my dad actually helped to run the village for a very short time. I don't know a lot about it myself, but there was some sort of catastrophe and he left. So Raynare pondered with a hand under her chin. Your dad, who was a half-human, half-vampire prince, somehow made friends with the leader of an angel village? How does that work? Naruto smiled as he started to sketch kanji. It's something to do with my dad's human side. On my dad's human side, his family was very open. They made friends with everyone in their pursuit of knowledge. It didn't matter to them if you were an angel or a devil. Originally, my dad's family was devoted to one of the alternate mythos, but after the different mythos started to really decline, the family cut their ties and started to practice alchemy and human magic. He grinned. My human side is better known than my vampire side in most cases, but that's beside the point. Eventually, my human ancestors decided to hook up with the vampire house of Vosk, which is a side branch from the Valdi family. The Namikaze helped the Vosk make a bargain with the infinite dragon god, and it permanently bound the two families together. You're a prince in 3 ways then? Sort of. My human side isn't really royal unless you count the old status granted by an ancient mythos, but about 2/3 of the Namikaze that are left, not many mind you, are vampire hybrids. My father took it a step further by marrying a pure devil. So which old mythos was it that your ancestors worshipped? You'll see tomorrow. He smirked as he finished his writing and licked his wrist clean before blowing the blood dry. Naruto? Hush hush. Naruto leaned back and bit her shoulder. Ow. His eyes turned crimson as he let his stylus and papers fall to the side. He crawled over top of her, pinning her to the bed. Now I believe I'm done for the night, well, with writing anyways. What if Naruto has vampire wife in high school DxD? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.